Councillor, and also our Director of Corporate Services and Governance, Celine McCartan. And welcome also to those of you joining us by YouTube this evening. First of all, on our screen, first of all, we'll go actually to apologies. If I could go first of all to Councillor Mcclaire, please, for your party.
No apologies, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. To Councillor Victor Warrington. No.
Sorry, Chair, you're too quick for me here. No apologies that I'm aware of. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Warrington. Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. An apology at this time for Councillor Keith Elliott, who has been called out on the Northern Ireland Fire Rescue Service call.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's great, thank you. And then Councillor Mary Garrity, please.
Thank you, Chair. No apologies tonight.
Okay, and to the smaller parties and independents, have we any apologies? So I'm taking that there's none. Thank you. Second point on the agenda are declarations of interest. Okay, I'm not seeing any response there. So really, members, we're taking you through the legislative requirements. There's a slide on the screen that tells you what the legislative requirements are that we're looking at. The purpose of tonight's meeting, as I said, is rate setting. In advance of this, we have attended 4 estimates working groups, and I really have to congratulate the interest of members. There was a very, very good turnout among all councillors. So all councillors have been fully briefed on the process, and I have to say that the feeling was off accord. So at that point, we're going to move to our Director of Corporate Services and Governance, Celine McCartan, for paper A, please. Thank you.
Chair, members, thank you. So we're just going to go straight into the detail of the proposals for 21-22. The reference is paper A and Appendix 1 to paper A, which is a detailed paper that runs through all of the expenditure proposals and the funding of those. The first section of that paper sets out the objectives of the rates process, and really ultimately we are working to set an affordable rate that will also cover the cost of operating services in the council for the year ahead. Now, not a lot of people like the rates process unless you're particularly into numbers, and there is quite a lot of numbers involved here, but I think it's fair to say that this year has been particularly difficult. There is a lot of anxiety and concern about financial circumstances, about how businesses are affected and how people are worried about their jobs and their finances. And we are aware of those issues, and elected members have reminded and highlighted very genuine concerns and issues of financial hardship and the crisis that there is. And that very much sets the backdrop to the work on the estimates this year. That started, as the Chair has said, with the estimates working group. Now, the process of the estimate, or the purpose of the estimates working group, really is to scrutinise at a very significant level of detail all of the financial matters that are brought together to establish the rates. It involves looking at options. Some of those options this year have involved considering service reductions. It also looks at various iterations as the figures become more clear. It looks at money that's available from other sources, the impact of the rate space, and a whole variety of figures that are analysed at an operational level, and then also trying to ensure that the overall estimates reflects the Council's strategy and policy position as well. At that estimates working group, there was consideration of a number of different rates positions. In the early stages, we were looking at a very challenging situation where the rates was almost in the increase figure was almost in double digits, and a lot of work has taken place since that to reduce it. We also considered a 0%, which has been muted as well. And the conclusion really was that striking a 0% rate would impact on services, on projects now and into the future, and ultimately on jobs as well. And I'll come on to explain that the council is a significant employer in the district, and that is one of the drivers of our costs, and we seek to meet our obligations there as well. So just moving on then from the estimates working group that has led us to the special council meeting here tonight. The next slide highlights the responsibilities of the various parties who have worked through the process. So the members ultimately are responsible for considering and improving the estimates of income and expenditure, which becomes the council's budget for next year, and then related to that to fix the amount to be raised by means of Writ. The Chief Financial Officer, or Chief Executive, Alison, has a role to consider the robustness of the estimates to meet the services of the Council, and also the adequacy of reserves, and we will talk further about that as well, and that's really to ensure the stability of the Council. Management, that's officers, finance officers, and also all officers across the Council, have a role in relation to working through the detail of their budgets to ensure that they meet the needs of the service, to highlight what their priorities are, and indeed where there are options to be considered, to provide information on that as well. So I referred to the objectives, and they're shown in this slide and also contained at section 1. I plan to proceed on into the detail, again just emphasising that we've looked at the revenue expenditure, we look at the capital expenditure, we look at our reserve position, we look at our rate space, and with the overall objectives of trying to achieve an affordable district rate, chargeable on the ratepayer, and also adequate funding for the Council's plans and priorities. In terms of the revenue budgets then, there's a whole series of considerations, starting at a high level with all of the various strategies that have been developed for the Council. There's also been a review of proper arrangements, the service demands, and in particular this year, a focus on efficiencies. In terms of the rate space, the first relevant factor is a revaluation of non-domestic business properties in 2020, and then also consideration of the COVID-19 impact. There has been consideration of inflationary increases, tariffs, landfill tax, and all of these issues that the Council has to project for and include in our figures. The income levels for the Council, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail, are estimated, but they are quite significantly impacted by the COVID-19 situation. In planning for that, we have established a contingency reserve that will be used to help to manage the situation over really a 2 to 3 year period. We have been active and have welcomed central government support that has been paid to councils, and we've worked to try and maximise funding from other sources in order to mitigate against the challenges that we've faced. This is a budget, so I mean the figures are estimated, and in order to do that there's a series of assumptions. And the next slide sets out the details of the assumptions, which are also contained in the narrative of the report on the estimates. And really moving on from that, I want to talk a little bit about salaries and wages in the Council. Overall, we have, as an employer, we employ just over 1,000 people, some part-time, some casual staff, as well as a lot of full-time and permanent staff as well. We're a good employer. We lead by example, pay the living wage, and we offer good terms and conditions, which is what would be expected of the Council. And that does then relate and really drive quite a number of our costs. This slide shows a profile of the staff costs of the Council for the current year and gives you comparative information on previous years as well. So you can see overall, just there in the middle of the page, for 2021, the total estimated staff costs is 27,404,000, which is a slight reduction on the projection for the current year of about 0.3%, or 68,000 overall. Staff costs for this council represent 72% of the net budget. Last year that was 76%, so it has decreased slightly, and so therefore they are a very significant driver of costs, and they comprise not just the salaries and wages that are paid, but also the various employer costs that any employer would incur, both national insurance, mandatory pension costs, and other associated costs. There has been an upward incline in our overall staff costs. In some of the earlier years, there was an uplift in staff numbers, and that reflected where there had been vacancy control in place previously. More recently, it has been to address various different pay issues. We've fully addressed pay alignment across all grades of staff in the council in all areas, and there have been other national agreements that have been implemented that have impacted on the cost. So moving on in terms of our estimates, the net expenditure position, and in this slide we have the figures for 21-22 with the original budget for 2021 as a comparator. The movement is shown as a percentage and then as an actual figure, and it's analysed between our 4 directorates, and then corporate management as well. So this shows that for 21-22 we have a net revenue spend of 38,058,000, which is a 5.3% increase on the previous year. It's called net spend because it's stated net of income received. The overall movement there you can see is just under £2 million, and if we move on to the next slide you'll see that the most significant factor in that is the estimated loss of income. So the council does generate income across a wide range of services and facilities, and some of that is done under statute and some of it is done on commercial terms. And I suppose if there's anything that the last year has shown us is that it has been a very fine balance that we strike between trying to raise revenue from different sources, and I think it's fair to reflect that this council was fairly successful in that respect. But with facilities closed and services reduced and demand for services reduced because of other restrictions and factors, there is likely to be well, we've already experienced this year and it's likely to continue for some time, a significant loss of the income position. And so the projections for 21-22 is a loss of income compared to the original budget last year of 2,715,000. In addition to that, we've identified that there are some extra costs around landfill tax, around PPE, welfare facilities, IT costs, and a contribution that's made each year towards balancing out the election costs, and they come to 320,000. Against that, we are able to reduce some one-off costs included in last year's budget, including the provision for pay simulation and the costs related to the initial work on the growth deal, and they come to a reduction of 175,000. And following a detailed review of all of our cost areas, there have been efficiency savings generated of 877,000. Some of those related to income reduction, other savings, but we have been quite thorough in our approach to that. Net salaries and wages, as previously explained there, have reduced by 68,000. So that reconciles the total additional revenue costs of 1.9 million. It's a net budget, and the majority of it is made up by loss of income, partly offset then by other efficiencies and savings that have been made. In the next section, I want to go through, and as is stated in the detailed report, just to make comment on where that expenditure is incurred and how those resources are used across the different service areas. The first area that we're looking at is community health and leisure, which is allocated 27% of the overall budget, and that's across 5 service areas, and you can see that represents a total figure of 10,396,000. The largest service area there is leisure, recreation and sport, which is just over £4 million. That's £1 million more than last year, and that is really attributable to the reduction in income that is expected across the piece there. And even when we do open up our leisure centres and facilities, there are of course assumptions there, because the number of people who can use the facilities is affected by potentially by social distancing for some time yet, and I suppose we're also mindful that there's other demands now for outdoor recreation and other approaches to leisure, recreation and sport. The next area is arts and heritage, and that covers a range of our facilities. It includes the Marble Arch Caves, Enniskillen Castle, Strull Arts, the Ardone Theatre, and again you'll note that there are a number of those facilities are closed. It also includes the services that we provide there, and there are a number of arts programmes and other services and support that's provided by that service area. In total, there is an increase here. It has been reduced by some overhead savings and efficiencies that are targeted. The overall increase is 180,000, which represents 6% of the total costs there. The next area is environmental health, where the expenditure in environmental health is 1,380,000, which is marginally down, 1% down on last year, and again due to efficiencies that have been sought there. In community services, we spend 1,209,000. That entails the support for a number of community centres, as well as programmes, and also the Policing and Community Safety Partnership. There has been a number of savings, modest savings there as a result of administration efficiencies that have been identified. The final area of building control and licensing, the net cost is 749,000. That's against a figure of 345,000 last year, which shows an increase of 395,000. The reason here is because of a downturn again in the service requirement, because the number of applications that are currently coming in have reduced, and the income has reduced somewhat as well. Our off-street car parking is also part of our licensing service. Again, there's anticipated to be a reduction in income there, as indeed for licensing fees generally, due to some of the government announcements that have been made. This service also includes animal welfare, which is funded through DAERA, the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. So overall, the community health and leisure budget is looking at an increase of 19%, or 1.6 million, on the costs that were attributable last year, and to a large extent that is driven by the new circumstances that we find ourselves in post-COVID. The next area is corporate services and governance, which represents 18% of the overall budget. There's, I suppose, a number of service areas here, but really all behind the scenes and operating to keep the council and the other services operating. So in the first area of corporate management, we have also the policy and strategic services area. There's been a reduction there of 150,000 because of a reduction in the contingency that was previously included there. There's also a budget sum here for the development of strategic capital projects and other initiatives, and with the exception of those, the costs are broadly in line with last year. In democratic and customer services, there has been an increase towards the election reserve that was previously mentioned based on the cost of the election. There has been some reductions in overheads and general administration savings across the department, but overall it comes out just broadly similar to last year at 1,829,000. Our finance services cost 1,196,000. There has been a reduction in bank interest and investment income due to reduced rates that are available. There's also been some additional costs around the implementation of a computer system that have had to be accounted for in this year, and then just salary costs in line with cost of living increases. In human resources, other corporate services then relate to our legal services and our IT services, and also our regional property certificate unit, which is operated as a shared service across all of the councils. The running costs of these are 1,035,000, which is up slightly on last year when it was 952,000 due to some additional provision for legal costs for IT, network security, and also that's required to support virtual working. The human resources cost is 827,000, which is increased from 800,000 last year. There has been some increase in resources allocated to the Employee Health and Wellbeing Programme, and again some new systems that have one-off costs this year in relation to those. So overall, the corporate services and governance section of the council has a cost of 6,898,700, which is 1% up on the previous year when all of those issues are addressed. The next area for review is the Department of Environment and Place, and again there are 4 service areas included here, and it represents 45% of the overall budget for the council, and a figure of just over £17 million. The largest of those and the largest service overall is waste and recycling, where we spend just over £9.5 million. There have been some cost increases there, and again some efficiencies that have been worked through, so the overall position then is broadly similar to last year. In parks and open spaces, that covers all of our parks, our water recreation sites, minor works, street cleaning, public conveniences, horticulture, play areas and biodiversity, and also some elements of festive expenditure and technical costs. So there's an additional 60,000 there that's attributable to the general increases in wages, and then an additional 18,000 for utility costs and other operating costs in that area. Contracts and operations management covers the garages and vehicle maintenance support, and also technical services at both depots, and the cost of those have stayed fairly static from one year to the next at 827,000. Operations and estates then includes the running of the council's civic and administrative buildings. There's a general allocation for maintenance across the council's estate, and the costs in this area are 1,328,000, which are very similar to last year, with some additional rental income then offset by movements in other building costs and some loss of income on rental properties as well. So overall environment in place is 17,131,000, and that represents a 1% increase on last year. The final area then is regeneration and planning, and again there are 4 service areas that are analysed here. The total expenditure is 3,633,000, and there's overall a 4% increase. Funding investment is very similar to last year, so again some cost increases have been offset by efficiencies. Planning is an increase of 224,000 to 1,016,000, and again the situation here is that there has been a significant loss of income. And there have been some other cost movements and some changes in staff structure and administration. The tourism and economic development section budget requirement is 1,342,000, which is a reduction of 88,000 on last year, and that is really due to the end, or moving towards the end, of a number of projects. There is the conclusion of the Biz Mentors programme, the conclusion of the Rural Development Programme, and also a reduction in the growth deal budget as the additional costs have been met by a reserve from the previous year. So there is also a reduction in some of the costs attributable to specific projects and funded posts which have ceased. The planning and community performance section has a cost of 461,000 against 438,000 last year, so is very broadly similar to the previous year's costs. So as stated, that comes to a total of 3,633,000 and a 4% increase. So that really looks at our revenue expenditure and the work that has been done there. The next area that we have to consider in terms of the estimates is the capital expenditure. There are two papers on the agenda that are relevant here. Appendix 1B, which sets out the 2021 to 22 plan, and then paper B, which is Appendix 1A, which sets out a 5-year projection as opposed to a detailed plan of anticipated projects over the period 21 to 2026. So to explain to you how we approach this within the Council, first of all, we focus on projects that are subject to external funding and deemed to be priority. I suppose the simple principle here is if there is funding available, then it's advantageous to the Council to try and access that funding, because ultimately that saves Council resources and ratepayers money. So we do put a focus on externally funded projects. There's then Council-funded projects that are at an advanced stage of planning and are likely to be delivered in year. And then there is a general allocation which is there to support in-year works on a district-wide basis. There is a significant then allocation, a 250,000 allocation for ongoing capital maintenance works. We have looked and talked previously about project management resources and how that is operated to support delivery. And we also need to consider then the financing of this capital and maintenance plan. And again, we'll set out the proposals for the first year, 21-22, in that respect. So looking at the draft plan for 21-22, which is set out in Appendix 1B. Unfortunately, it says paper C there, but it's actually Appendix 1B of your documents. There are quite a number of projects that we have been able to attract external funding for, and that means that we are proposing expenditure of 8,850,000, of which we will attract hopefully external funding of 7,990,000. So the Council contribution to those is in the region of under 10% at 860,000. So as I said, very advantageous for us to pursue those. The projects that would be included there would be the Northern Ireland Full Fibre scheme, which aims to provide broadband connectivity between a number of public buildings, which will in turn then increase the broadband capacity for surrounding buildings and anything anywhere that's on the route. There's also the Enniskillen Public Realm scheme, the Enniskillen Workhouse project, Marble Arch Caves work, which again there's anticipated funding from DAERA and Tourism NI, and also the growth deal. We also then have council-funded projects which come to 6,620,000 in this first projection. That will include delivery of the play strategy. It'll also include upgrades to pitches, parks and public conveniences, recycling facilities, the Riverwalk development, and also revitalisation in Campsie. Contribution towards a collaborative waste infrastructure project around mixed dry recyclables, and some initial funding around development projects at the Ardoan crematorium, and our ongoing commitment to the ICT strategy and also our fleet strategy, which requires annual replacement. It's our experience that our estimations here have always been slightly overstated, so there is a 20% reduction applied to this high-level programme based on our experience, which reduces the overall projection then to 12.92 million of what might be a more realistic spend in 21-22. The next paper that I want to draw your attention to is an update on the current capital programmes, and again there is information provided in the appendix on that. And we had previously given you projections of 12,750,000. Again, it's a similar sort of profile, quite significant number of externally funded projects that we're working hard to deliver in order to draw down the funding there. Those come to just over 8,275,000 with external funding of 6,615,000. Less spend then on council funded projects and the general allocation to works across the district. The next area that I want to just touch on is the draft 5-year capital plan, and that's really covering a period of 2022 to 22-26. There is more work to be done in this area. There is more work to be done around prioritisation and also the development of the projects here. But it is fair to say that the Council has aspirations to invest further in infrastructure and important projects that will benefit our district, that will support tourism, that will support economic development, that will improve the welfare facilities, the leisure facilities across the district, and invest in the future prosperity of the district. So whilst this is a high-level plan, it doesn't confirm project approval. It really, I suppose, sets out a projection, and our normal council approval and governance processes would be applied to specific projects as we work through those. Catherine will touch a little bit more on these in our medium-term financial plan, but it is, again, just trying to have that more longer-term planning approach to considering capital as well. Focusing back on 21-22, and the capital plan that we've outlined there of 12,920,000, we have to look to see how that will be financed. So I've already identified that we anticipate significant external grant funding support. There's also an allocation from revenue transfers that can be used to contribute to some specific projects and is required to contribute to specific projects. And then we look to our reserves, and this is reserves that we have established to help support capital. Again, there's timing differences in terms of when you maybe receive monies and when you're able to expend them. But we have a number of earmarked reserves that would be used then to fund this the proposal for 21-22. And they're set out there, and I suppose the conclusion is that we can deliver that project of 12,920,000 without further external borrowing on the basis of this capital plan and the financing proposal here. That's not to say that we still have to, because of the I suppose the guidelines and regulations around capital accounting, we do still have to make a provision on an ongoing basis through our revenue account, and that's known as the cost of financing the capital plan. So again, you have the revenue transfers and then what's called the minimum revenue provision, which again, Catherine will explain in more detail in connection with our capital strategy and also our treasury management. The final item on that page there is around capital development, and it's a figure of 245,000, which has been earmarked and included in these figures, and that is really building towards the future and towards the 5-year plan that we've touched on there. So that gives us total costs then in this area that would be considered, or the cost of delivering that type of capital programme, of 2,545,000. I want to move on then to talk a little bit about the use of reserves. I recently looked at an audit office report, the most recent audit office report in respect of local government, where they have set out, highlighted that it is important that councils do sensibly and prudently manage reserves in order to ensure, well, the stability of the organisation. So why do we have reserves? Well, first of all, there can be differences, as I've just mentioned, in the timing of income and expenditure. Some of our capital projects, we may receive funding early and then have to spend it out over a period of time. Equally, some of the projects where we are paying money out to other organisations through some of our grant schemes, we may receive the funding at a certain point in time, but the community organisation or group may not be ready to access that funding until various, well, even maybe statutory approvals or other project arrangements are made. So we do try to balance the timing of the income and expenditure and match those as carefully as possible. If we took the benefit of all of the grant whenever we received it and then had to spend out the money a year or 2 years later, that would be a very unbalanced approach. So we use the reserves to try and smooth that out. Reserves are also a means and ways of building for medium and long term and I suppose planning for that. It is a little bit like having savings where you put so much aside and then you're working towards something that you're looking to buy in the future. It is actually a legislative requirement for the councils to have some reserves so that essentially we don't go bust. And again, we will talk a little bit more about that in Alison's report as the Chief Financial Officer's report on the adequacy of reserves. But again, I suppose the overriding principle is that reserves are needed for financial stability to try and ensure that you have modest incremental rises and not a boom or bust approach. In the last few weeks, I've been asked, is the council stable? Is it financially stable? Does it have enough money? And it's because that we have reserves that we can say positively yes, that we are stable and that we can plan for the coming year, meet the challenges of the current financial year, and also look to the future as well. So we have the reserves that we have mainly fall into three categories. There's a general reserve, which again will be talked about further at paper C. There are capital reserves that are related very much to capital expenditure and, as I've just demonstrated there, will be used to fund a number of projects. There are some other earmarked reserves, like for example, I've mentioned already the election reserve, and then also landfill aftercare costs, which are worked and operated through a reserve. And then in the last year, we have set up what we have described as a COVID contingency reserve. So it was first established with council approval in March 2020. At that stage, we were coming to the end of the 1920 financial year, and we identified that it was likely we were going to be going into a bumpy patch. So the council approved that we would transfer any surplus for 1920, and then also in the current year later, that would be transferred to a COVID contingency, which would help us manage and work our way through that. And that's what we have been doing over the course of the year. We have been actively seeking efficiencies and savings, be it around overheads, be it around redeployment of staff. We have sought to maximise the income, worked with our central government sponsor body, Department for Communities, also with DERA in respect of waste. And we've also been able to benefit and have made claims through the job retention scheme, the furlough scheme. And all of that really falls under the category of exceptional funding. So because we are in a position that we have been trying to set that money aside whenever we are able to do so, we propose now in these estimates to apply just short of £1 million of this reserve to assist with balancing our books in 2021. So the overall aim of the COVID contingency reserve is to help us to manage the stability of the council's finances and to support recovery. We do estimate that it's going to be at least a 2-year process. It will be more than 1 year. So again, we hope that there will be some additional funds in this reserve that will help us balance the revenue budgets in 22-23, and that's the plan that we're working to at this point. The next slide, again for transparency, gives you a breakdown of all of the reserves that the council has in the published accounts at March 2020, and then an estimation of where we reckon that we will be at March 2021. And then just, I suppose, showing you that pictorially as well, and I suppose information that has been reviewed and is available there. This graph just shows the cash balances that the council has had, the loan balances that the council has, and then the general reserve, which again we'll come on to describe in paper C. Another element of our estimates is the money that the council receives by way of central government support. And there are 3 grants here just to really highlight to you that form part of our figures as well. The first is the Rate Support Grant. The details of the legislation are there. It's administered and determined by the Department for Communities, and there's a certain amount of funds which is distributed between a number of councils. It looks at the wealth of the council, the needs of the council, and then if they feel that there is a shortfall there, makes an entitlement, gives a distribution on that basis. The estimated figure that we've included for Rate Support Grant income in 21-22 is 956,000, and that's up from a figure of 530,000 last year, so it's a significant increase that we are projecting there. And that's on the basis of the information that we have from the Department for Communities at the moment, which is that we will receive an allocation of just over 6% of the funding available. The next grant that we look at is the derating grant. This was discussed last, I believe, when we talked about the revaluation and the consultation that there was with LPS around revaluation issues. It's set in legislation again, and it makes a contribution to the council for premises and properties that are derated under the terms of the rate order. And then we are compensated for that as other councils are as well. The figure that's included in our estimates in 21-22 is £2,049,583, and that is an increase of 4%, which possibly could be considered a positive, a figure of 74,000, and it's based on the current information that we have, which is related to the actual, I would also point out that the actual position then isn't settled until the following financial year, but again, it's based on what we know to be, and then that information projected forward. And again, members will be familiar that industrial premises receive a 70% derating grant, freight and transport businesses receive a 75% derating grant, sport and recreation facilities receive an 80% derating grant, and community amateur sports clubs receive 100% of a derating grant. And therefore we are recompensed for that loss of income, of rates income by central fund from central government. The third grant that the council benefits for is called the Transferred Functions Grant, and it relates to the budget share of costs and services that moved from central government to the council following the review of public administration. Again, it's enshrined in legislation. It was set at the 1st of April 2015, and essentially it's inflated each year by the amount of the rates increase, the non-domestic increase. So the figure that's included in the 21-22 estimates is £555,076, which again is up by a marginal sum. The next graph shows you just really plots that income over the last number of years for the Rate Support Grant in blue, the derating grant in green, and then the Transferred Functions Grant in grey. And then in the last year, then the funding that has been received from the exceptional funding for loss of income in relation to COVID-19. So fairly substantial overall support from central government. It represents about 10% of our net spend overall, 3.6 million in total for the year. The next area, members, that I want to talk about is the rates base. So far we have talked about all of the inputs into the rates and how the expenditure is used, and then the deductions that there is for income. The rates base is essentially the divisor. When we calculate the total that is needed to run the council, then it's divided by what's called the estimated penny product, which represents the rates population of Fermanagh and Omagh District Council. It comprises of domestic and then non-domestic rates, and broadly the split there for us is 55% of revenue comes from domestic rates and 45% comes from our non-domestic or business rates. Looking at the domestic rates, it's based on valuations, household valuations. The total value is a figure of over 5 billion. The average value is 113,000. That's the average house valuation for a property in Fermanagh and Omagh. The collection rate is estimated at 95%. And that means the total rates collectible for the district in this year for 2021 was a sum of £43,564,686. And of that, 19,658,000 came to the council, and the remaining 23,906,000 went to the central government to pay the regional rates, which is then used for roads, education, health, and to balance, I suppose, what we would describe as the dormant budget. If you look down then, the next column, the information is there for our non-domestic or business properties. It's a different valuation basis. It's based on net annual value. The valuation date, as we know, is the 1st of April 2020. And the value of business, the net annual value of premises in Fermanagh and Omagh is 81,500,000, and that puts us mid-list in the context of Northern Ireland, about 7.8% of the total value in Northern Ireland. Working out an average value there, it's 18,000. The collection is estimated at 92%, which means then that the business rates population of Fermanagh and Omagh pay in 2021 41,141,000, of which 16,439,000 comes to the council by way of district rates, and 24,701,000 is then paid over to central government as part of the regional rates element. Again, we're very mindful that at this time that there are concerns about rate space, and we share those concerns as well. Obviously, the restrictions and current trading conditions are very challenging and have impact on a lot of non-domestic businesses. Equally, we don't know the full implications for business of the EU exit, and there has been that recent revaluation exercise. There have been business rates holidays agreed for different periods over the last year, and some talk of extension of those, which obviously would be very welcome for business rate payers in Fermanagh and Omagh. I suppose there would also be a general concern over the collection of rates, both domestic and non-domestic. And because all of this is administered by Land and Property Services, LPS, it is some time down the road before the council has a sight of any significant movement, be that positive or negative, in relation to either the rate space, the rates collected, or any of those issues. So for purposes of our estimates, we have discussions with LPS and agree an estimated penny product. The estimated penny product is the value of the council's tax base, both the domestic and non-domestic properties, and as I explained, it's a key figure in the calculation of the district rate because essentially it's the divisor, and we're advised on that by LPS. I also wanted to share with you some research work that has been done by, it's actually Ulster University, apologies to anyone with any associations there. It's the Ulster University Economic Policy Centre. It relates only to non-domestic, so to business rates, and they have done an exercise across the business sector for Northern Ireland, for all of the councils, to look at what the potential impact of the COVID pandemic and other challenging changes would be. So they've estimated a worst case scenario of a potential reduction of 4.33%, which would be a reduction in rates for this council of 717,000, or maybe a more likely scenario to be a reduction of 3.68%, which would be a reduction of 576,000. They've also looked and taken those projections forward, that research, into years 2, 3 and 4. That information has then been factored into to the discussions with LPS. Another slide here, just that again worth sharing with you, is just a little bit more information on the business rates again. And for this council, we have just under 6,000 business properties paying rates. But on the graph here, you see an analysis and breakdown of the top 100 business rates in the district. And in total, those 100, the total NAV is 48% of the total, which represents then a contribution of £8 million of the district rates. The NAV here ranges from 145,000 to 3.3 million, and you can see a bit of a breakdown there of the different sectors that those represent. So just to finish then in this section on the penny product, which is the divisor, and to clarify where we have set. So based on the discussions with LPS, you can see here for each of the years how the penny product has increased, and that means that our rate space has grown. That again is a positive. It means that the rate space then, that the rates can be spread across a wider grouping. For purposes of this year's figures, we have not increased the penny product. We have held it at the same rate as 2021. The bar chart figure is the figure that would be calculated if we applied the 4.58% reduction of the Ulster University research. So that identifies really an area of risk, a margin of risk in terms of really the whole estimates and rates process for this year, because we will not know or won't have sight of the actual penny product until well into the financial year 21-22. As such, we won't know if we have then set the rates at the appropriate rate to raise the funds raised. But again, this is done with the best efforts and in terms of assumptions and through discussion again with members and others. So moving towards the end, you'll be pleased to know in terms of finalisation. The next slide is an extract from paper 1A, and it shows, I suppose, the bottom end of the estimates. So we've worked through the net budget, we've worked through the reserves, the capital expenditure, the central government support. That means that the amount that we estimate is required for next year is a figure of £36,593,060, which represents 1.37% increase on the sum that was raised for last year. But that is notable that is a considerably less than the 5.3% increase in net budget that is required to operate the council. The estimated penny product I've described to you in just the last section, and that would give us a non-domestic rate of 22.1225. Applying the conversion factor, that gives us a domestic rate of 0.3718. Just in the last week or 10 days, there has been a change made to the legislation which allows the council to move away from applying the standard conversion factor and to set separate non-domestic and domestic rates. We have looked at that. These are not mutually exclusive decisions because if you reduce the non-domestic rate to 0%, you then increase the domestic rate accordingly. If you reduce the non-domestic rate or the domestic rate to 0%, you have to increase the non-domestic rate. So overall, the same sum has to be raised and through this process. So in the interest of fairness at this stage, we have applied the same process as previously, which is to apply a consistent factor and for domestic and non-domestic. But there is some flexibility that can be explored further, and that is maybe something we would want to do following consultation in the future. The most up-to-date inflationary information that we've obtained was released yesterday through the Office of National Statistics, and it outlines a retail price index figure of 1.4%, a consumer price index figure of 0.7%, consumer price index figure including housing of 0.9%, and then consumer price index including owner-occupied housing of 1.3%. There has been an upward trend in inflation. Again, I would imagine that Brexit, EU exit related costs and other costs such as just even related to business operations in the COVID environment have contributed to that. So overall then the 1.37% when applied to the total rates bill equates to a 0.6 increase in overall rates bills. And the tables on the next pages provide the impact that means to the total rates bill for non-domestic ratepayers, first of all, in various different categories. This is some useful information just to get a better understanding of where the rates, how they are generated. There are 420 properties in the district with a valuation of under £1,000. That means that their total rates bill is under £500, and as I've explained, we get about 40% of that. That means that their increase from the previous year is a figure of £3, just under £3. There are 1,140 properties who have a valuation between 1,000 and 2,500. That means that their bill is somewhere in the region of £500 to £1,250, and the increase is between £3 and £7. There are 1,370 business properties with rates valuation of 2,500 to 5,000. That means they have a rates bill between £1,250 and £2,500, and their increase is between £7 and £15 for the year. There are 1,225 properties with a valuation of between 5,000 and 10,000, which means that their rates bill annually is 2,500 to 5,000, of which the council receives 40%, and that means that the annual increase there is between £15 and £30. There are 840 properties with a valuation of between 10 and 20,000, rates bill of between 5 and 10,000, and an increase of between £30 and £60 for the year. 544 properties between 20,000 and 50,000 with rates bill between 10 and 25,000, and that means that there's an increase of between £60 and £149. And finally, there's 340 properties who are valued at over £50,000. That means that their rates bill ranges between 25,000 and 1.6 million, and you're looking at an increase there of between £149 to anything up to £10,000. So the total non-domestic rates that would be collectible for the district based on these projections would be 41 million, of which 16.6 million would come to the council. Some information on our domestic ratepayers. There are just over 50,000 domestic properties across the district. The average valuation is 113,000, which would generate a rates bill of 936,000. And that then gives us, I refer this to Appendix C of your papers as well, which is a little bit more detail there. That would be a contribution to the council of £425 and an increase on last year of £5.68. The house valuation in Fermanagh is slightly lower than the Northern Ireland average house valuation, which is 120,000. That gives a rates bill of £994, and of that, £451 is what is paid to the council for services across the year, and that would be an increase of £603. The other figures are there up to the maximum cap, which is 400,000 for a domestic property. A domestic property valued at 400,000 would have a rates bill in Fermanagh of £3,312, and they would be looking at an increase of £20, just over £20. So in total, the domestic rates that are collected in the district next year based on these projections will be £44 million, and of that £20 million will be attributable to the council. So that concludes the first item on the agenda, 3.1. Again, I take you back to the start where we have worked through there the revenue expenditure proposals, the capital expenditure implications, consideration of reserves, the rate space implications with the overall objective of achieving an affordable rate and also adequate funding to support plans and priorities and services. Thank you.
Thank you, Celine. That was a considerable amount of information and a demonstration of the work that has gone into preparing the papers for consideration tonight. At this stage, I'd invite members, if they have any questions, if they could indicate on the presentation that has been given here. The first speaker is Councillor O'Coffey.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to make clear, because obviously there are a number of bullet points here, and we're still on 3.1. So at this stage, you'll take questions on that, I take it, and then if we have any subsequent, we can raise it on the next. Yeah. Okay. I've only really got one issue on the 3.1. It's in relation to Paper A, Appendix 1, on the leisure, recreation, and sport. And I note at the end of the section that there's going to be partially offset to the shortfall in income by reduced overheads and savings identified 300,000 within the service area. Now, my understanding was that 120,000 was identified at previous opportunities or meetings on this issue. And I'm really just wondering whether I could have clarity whether those involve any reduction to the opening times of our leisure services. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, I'll respond initially, and if need be, John, the Director, can contribute as well.
Okay,
so
thank you.
The 300,000, again, there have been some overhead savings, and there have been some savings. There is projected to be some reduced programmes and some, I suppose, variable staff costs that will reduce there. The 120,000 that was talked about previously, and I think we clarified for Councillor O'Coffey, were further iterations of savings which related to the arts and heritage area. So really, there was, in addition to the income loss here, the early work on the budgets in recreation, leisure, recreation and sport identified 300,000 of savings that could be almost attributable to the income side of things. Members will be aware that there have been slight adjustments to hours in the post-COVID for the short time that our leisure centres were open. Some of them closed at 9 o'clock as opposed to 10 o'clock. There has been no decision to make any other significant changes to hours, but when the leisure centres do reopen, we hope to open them as much as possible. We also hope to look at what our community recreation and leisure programme will be and how that will be resourced. So we would anticipate changes, but as it stands at the moment, there has been no changes to opening hours, and anything as previously confirmed that in that respect would be subject to equality screening, and indeed if that was necessary. So the 120,000 is something different, which we've dealt with separately. This was part of the early iterations of the budget, and as you appreciate, with that level of reduction in income, you would expect that there would be some cost savings as well, and that's what that figure relates to.
Okay, thank you very much, Celine. Thank you for your question there, Councillor Coffey. The next question from Councillor Deehan, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Celine, for a very, very comprehensive report. Chair, I was quite excited actually last week when I heard Minister Murphy announce new legislation that would enable the Council to strike differential rates for domestic and non-domestic properties. And I know, Chair, that Celine has referenced that in her report. Could I ask Celine just to go over that again as to why she feels this would not be an advantageous thing for us to do at this stage? And I know the legislation was introduced very late in the day, just last week, but Chair, if I could just ask Celine, please, to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Deehan. I'll just pass over to Celine here. Thank you. Thanks, Celine.
Okay, Chair, Councillor Deehan. I suppose I'm going to take it back to the numbers here. overall, the increase that we're looking at here is a figure of 495,000. So if it is there is the scope for council to decide that all of that will be levied on domestic ratepayers, or indeed that all of it would be levied on non-domestic ratepayers. But one way or another, if one goes down, the other goes up quite significantly. I just need to check, and I will come back to you in the course of the meeting with what that would mean in percentage terms for the, if it was a zero domestic rate, what that would mean on the non-domestic rate, and vice versa. I just don't have those figures just immediately at hand, but the two are not they are linked regardless, because if one is set at 0%, then the other picks up the full burden. So that is it is an option. It's not something that we have had the opportunity or the time. Like you, it was a very interesting and announcement, I thought. The timing of it far from ideal, where, given where not just this council but other councils are in terms of the rates process. I do believe it's something we would want to explore further, but we would want to do that with appropriate consultation as well with representatives, if we can, indeed our ratepayers, our people. To see, because unfortunately it's not a case that all can be set at the lower rates, but I will come back to you just to clarify the figures whenever I access them here just in a moment, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Celine, for that. And I do fully appreciate that it was very late in the day that this announcement was made. And it's just, it is something that we as a council have been seeking for some time, the legislative framework which would allow us to strike differential rates, and just cognizant of the severe pressure that our businesses are under at present. But thank you for that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Deehan. And the next speaker is Councillor Seamus Green.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions here, and I'd just like to reply there to Josephine that the domestic ratepayers are under extreme pressure as well as the non-domestic. Just two questions here, Celine. In the last, given that we have a 1.5 million surplus this year, how many of from the amalgamation of the two councils, how many years have we had a surplus, and how many years have we had a deficit? And just then one follow-up question. The average, I think you said, house was 113,000 for rates valuation. Is there a breakdown on that on rural and big towns, small towns? Because I always get the impression that out in the rural areas they probably pay more rates because for the simple fact that they're able to build a bigger house because of more space. But the fact that they're so far away from services and all is a real downer on that. So is there a breakdown on that?
Okay, those two questions. Thank you. Pass you back over to Celine here. Thank you.
Okay, Chair, Councillor Green. So in terms of the reported position, financial position for the council for the year since the new council organisation was established, which is 2015, that my understanding, and I mean all of the accounts are published, but I think that in most years, maybe bar one, we have reported a modest surplus, not a substantial surplus, but a modest surplus. And I suppose the reason for that would be because we have sought to ensure that we don't go into a deficit position, and we have sought to try and manage within the budgets that have been available to us, and we have worked to do that as you would be required to do. It's not something that you can take lightly, and when a budget is set, you do work to be within it. We haven't generated huge surpluses. We've had some years that we've had, again, exceptional items. I can think of where there was a legal case around one of our landfill sites that generated an additional sum that again was able to be set to one side, but that wasn't part of our normal revenue budgets. So yes, we have managed our finances well and stably, and that has meant that we have, and we've continued to do that in this year as well. The 50,000 domestic properties is something that I will seek to do some further analysis on, because I think it would be important to have that information to inform any consultation around what the profile of the, what we should do in terms of variation between business and domestic ratepayers. There's no easy answer to this, because there will be lots of people who will feel, as we've already heard tonight, that businesses should take priority. There will equally be lots of people who feel that domestic ratepayers are feeling the most pressure. So that is why in this year I don't propose that we would change the what I suppose really has been a long established practice, but that we would seek to do some further analysis. That analysis can look at your rural properties, but my understanding of the valuation process is that it does take into account the size of the property, but it does also take into account the access to services, so one does balance the other. I could see that it would be an interesting exercise for plotting and mapping that all members might have an interest in, and it's certainly something we can take forward.
Okay, thank you for that, Celine, and thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Eamon Keenan is next.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Eamon.
Thank you, Celine. Yeah, a lot of information there, a lot to take in, but I suppose after looking at all the figures and estimates for the year ahead and looking back to last year, which was without a doubt an extremely difficult year for everyone, not just locally but worldwide, I'm confident that our council is financially very stable, as Celine has said. As last year, it did make a profit of 3.7 million during the pandemic, and I understand that there was a lot of variables that contributed to this, but nonetheless, we did turn a profit. 16 million liquid reserve. When we add the return on the 6 million of loans that were due back this year, that would leave 22 million in reserve if needed. To achieve a zero rates increase this year, it would cost 1.5 million. With all of this in mind, and the fact that there's been a lot of suffering by many people in our community, both financially and socially, due to COVID-19, I would like to formally propose this council puts in place a zero rates rise policy for the year, providing zero rates or zero cuts to service the workers' hours and terms and conditions.
Councillor Keenan, could you go back just to repeat that, because you did break up slightly, so we can hear your message clearly?
The proposal.
Your proposal.
Okay.
If you could restate the proposal, please. Thank you.
A zero rates rise this year, combined with the zero cuts to services and a zero cuts to projects and zero changes to workers' hours and terms and conditions this year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, thank you. Celine, would you like to respond to that?
Well, there's just a couple of items that I need to clarify there. I suppose the term profit is not appropriate in the context of, I suppose, a government or a local government body. We're not here to make profit. We're here to use the money that is raised to then deliver services and to invest in the district. We haven't made a profit of 3.7 million in this year. We have a surplus at the moment. We're not at the end of the year. We haven't funded the COVID reserve yet to the extent that I have outlined. I've outlined the plans that we have to do that, because we think that we will have a surplus as we move forward. The cash reserves and the, I think Councillor Keenan was referring to the loans back. Again, those are not, the loans form part of those cash reserves, and that was that was set out in the Treasury Management Report that was provided to members at this month's Policy and Resources meeting there earlier. So there's elements there that are in that, but those are represented in part by funding that we have already received for capital projects to be delivered out to other projects, as well as then some earmarked sums around the reserves as I've set out. And it is our recommendation and that it would not be possible to deliver, I suppose our view or observation, it would not be possible or sensible to have a 0% rates cut because rates position, because it would result in some cuts to services projects and ultimately to changes to jobs and that and arrangements. Those aspects can't all be delivered together, I'm afraid. So it is a case about priorities and trying to strike a balance between those factors, and that's what we have put the hours in to try and do and present to you here.
Thank you, Celine. And at this stage, we have other papers also to go through, so we will be taking all proposals at the end of the meeting. The next speaker is Councillor Emmett Mcclaire. Thank you, Emmett.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very in-depth presentation we've been given there, just shy of an hour. A lot of facts and figures to take on board, but I think looking at it and listening to it and having read through the papers that have been presented, it's worth bearing in mind that the overall aim, as stated, of the rates process is to meet legislative requirements to ensure that there's adequate funding in place to support the Council's delivery plans, whilst ensuring that an affordable district rate is charged to the ratepayer. And I think given the exceptional year that has been in it, given the difficulties and the financial hardships that businesses and individuals and families are facing right across our district, I think it is possible, and I'm not sure if the director used the word possible or sensible, but I think it definitely is possible that we strike a 0% rate this year without affecting our service provision, and I think that's vitally important to acknowledge as well. I know you said there that we'll have a place for proposals and seconds. I'm quite happy to second the proposal brought forward by Council. I think there is a lot of surplus money there. We have been presented with the facts, with the figures. As said, we have council loans coming back in this year before the end of the summer. I don't see an issue with that. Just looking through, I suppose, some of the figures that we have been presented with just in part of this 3.1 of the meeting, I'm wondering just in relation to some of the savings, some of the efficiency savings that have been noted as income reduction. I'm just wondering if we could get maybe slightly more information on that, because we would be very keen to protect people's jobs. I'm wondering if it has been, just in relation to that, what it's been. And aware just as well that there's been a reduction in community services of 2%, environmental health of 1%, and tourism and economic development of 6%. And again, surely these are areas we should be protecting and investing in. But obviously I'll have more questions as we come on, but I think it's just to note those points at the moment and maybe ask those questions. Thank you, Chair. Okay, thank you for that, Emmett. And as we work through the papers, obviously there will be more information there. Now, members, do we have any other questions at this point? I'm not seeing anybody indicating, so are we happy to move to the next point on the agenda, item 3.2, and invite Celine to take us through that?
I'm actually going to pass to Catherine.
To Catherine,
this is the more technical bit, so I'm going to. No.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Celine. So, agenda item 3.2, or paper B, is a medium-term financial plan for the period 2021 to 2026. And you will note on the paper that there are quite a few appendices. So I'll go through those and happy to take any questions at the end. Suffice to say that the medium-term financial plan itself outlines, as Celine has done earlier, the legislative requirements in relation to the setting of the rates, and more importantly, into terms of the Treasury management and capital activities of the Council. This Council has adopted the Prudential Code, which is a regulation included within the Finance Act NI 2011 that code is adopted. I suppose just to highlight that the main objectives of the code is to ensure within a clear framework that the capital expenditure plans of the Council are affordable, prudent, sustainable, and the Treasury management decisions are taken in accordance with good professional practice, in full understanding of the risks involved and how the risks will be managed by the Council. The code also requires the Council to look at capital expenditure investment plans in light of the Council's overall organisational strategy. The code highlights that effective financial planning, option appraisal, risk management and governance processes are considered in achieving a prudential approach to capital expenditure, investment and debt. The first appendix is the capital plan for the more medium term, and Celine referred to that earlier on in her presentation. And as noted that capital plan, which is appended at Appendix 1A, covers the period from 2021 up to 2025-26. It covers a suite of different types of projects right across the Council district. And I suppose in slight difference to the 2021-22, which is more short term and considers any external funding coming through, the majority of the plan over the more medium term considers more Council-led and at this stage funded projects. That's not to say that this is just a plan and a forecast, and as external funding becomes available, this plan will be reviewed and considered and updated and presented to Council in due course. In terms of the Council funded projects itself, which takes up most of the plan, just over 58 million, it looks at fleet updates, it looks at projects, as I mentioned, right across the Council in terms of development of the Council estate. Quite a significant investment is included in relation to the leisure centres. It covers play areas across the district, parks, open spaces, development plans of walkways, spend on public conveniences, recycling facility development and car parks. There are a number of other specific projects outlined in Appendix 1A. In relation to Appendix 1B, this is again a requirement that the Council must set a minimum revenue provision policy for the 2021-22 year. And that policy, again, Celine outlined in paper 1, is in relation to making a prudent provision for the repayment of debt that has been taken out in relation to previous capital expenditure. That figure of 1.6 million is included within the draft proposed budget that Celine mentioned earlier on in her presentation. Appendix 1C looks at the Council's Treasury management policy for the forthcoming year, the 2021 year. And within that policy, it looks at the Treasury management strategy and Treasury management practices. The policy outlines the Council's Treasury position at the 1st of April 21, with an anticipated external borrowing of 5.3 million and anticipated cash balances of 21 million. The policy considers the borrowing strategy and includes that this Council will maintain an under-borrowed position. It refers to the medium term, and in that context, the Council will not need to borrow in the medium term. It looks at the borrowing requirement of the Council and takes into account the capital plan as highlighted in Appendix 1A to determine affordability and the need to borrow, whether that be internally or externally. It highlights the borrowing positions of the Council at the moment as highlighted at 5.3 million, and that borrowing is held within government loan funds. The policy also considers debt reschedule and any potential to repay debts earlier is always taken into consideration. But in most cases and more recent experience has shown that hasn't been undertaken, as the penalties in respect of redemption outweighs the benefit of paying back early. The policy as well then looks at the Council's annual investment strategy. And I suppose it's very important to note that investments are deposited, firstly in terms of security of the investment, second in terms of liquidity of the investment, and lastly the yield. The policy outlines a number of areas of specified investments on page 8 of the policy, right across short-term cash deposits, call deposits, loans to other councils, and that they're all held for less than 365 days. The remaining sections of the policy looks at the credit worthiness of institutions in which investments are made, considers the investment limits that the council will have in place, and very importantly looks at the ability to be able to access council treasury management advisors who we work with on a day-to-day basis in terms of both the debt and treasury management side. There is an appendix to the policy which I don't propose to go through in relation to day-to-day treasury management practices, and covers areas around risk management, liquidity risk, interest rate exposure, and the legal and regulatory framework of that policy. The following appendix, Appendix 1D, are technical aspects required to underpin the capital planning position of the council, both in the 2021 year and looking at the medium term. The potential indicators are laid down in the code, and again, the appendix highlights all of the potential indicators required in compliance with that code. The indicators cover the external debt, as previously mentioned. The indicators also look at determining an affordable borrowing limit for this council, which has been calculated at 5.6 million. And that's really determined by looking at the borrowing position of the council in the forthcoming year, 2021, and just including an element for unusual cash movements of 1 million. In other words, the balance due at the end of next year proposed at this stage is 4.6 million, and the authorised limit then is 5.6 million. The potential indicators look at the capital expenditure plans as previously outlined, and whether or not there is an actual need to borrow. And the indicators also include the costs of the financing of capital expenditure on the grants and investment income of the council coming through. The indicators also look at the gross debt position. They look at compliance with the Code of Practice for Treasury Management. They consider interest rate exposure and that all debt will be on fixed interest rates and gross investments will be on variable rates over the short period. The final appendix to the medium-term financial plan is the capital strategy. And again, the capital strategy is included within CIPRA's Prudential Code of Good Guidance, which this council follows, and looks at how the overview of the capital expenditure, capital financing and treasury management activity is managed within the council. The capital strategy details again and summarises in some parts the council's planned spend over the forthcoming year. It considers the repayment of loans. It considers the asset management of the council, the treasury management of the council. So it's very much an overarching strategy in relation to the previous appendices mentioned. And it also looks again at the council's borrowing strategy. Included within the capital strategy is a liability benchmark of the council, which takes the capital financing requirement, which is the need to borrow, less the overall borrowing position, takes a look at the usable reserves, the working capital required by the council, and determining as to whether or not the council is in a net investment position at the end of this year and the forthcoming periods. The capital strategy also considers other liabilities that the council have, and just noting there that the only other liabilities apart from the debt position of the council is the pension liability and, as Celine has mentioned, provisions in relation to the closure and aftercare costs of the landfill sites. And finally, the capital strategy looks at the governance arrangements around the treasury management and investment activities and the borrowing activities of the council. Finally then, section 9 of the medium-term financial plan looks at the revenue, income and expenditure plans over the short to medium term. Included within that paper and on the next slide is the 3-year forecast for the period 2022 to 2025. It's important to note that this 3-year is a forecast and not a budget, and it's based on much broader assumptions than those even of the 2021 revenue, income and expenditure figures. It's there for forecasting purposes only and is not at this form of any part of a budget for the Council over the forthcoming periods. The 4-year forecast has been developed to support this Council in its decisions if it's in a position that it needs to deal with unexpected financial pressures that may suddenly arise, and together with the identification of risks facing the Council. There is further work to be carried out in the medium term to identify efficiency targets, to realign budgets to meet the actions from the Council's corporate plans, to address operational issues related to the pandemic recovery, and to specify actions to be taken should an unforeseen financial constraint or pressure emerge. In summary then, the medium-term financial plan covers the capital plan for the period 21-26, looks at forecasts for the period 2022-25. It's in compliance with the Finance Act I-2011 and associated guidance. It includes a suite of potential indicators, a minimum revenue provision policy, a Treasury management policy, and a Treasury management strategy. And again, there's further work to be developed, which would include sensitivity and risk analysis and a review of the government arrangements to be progressed in 2021, which will also inform the medium-term position. Chair, there are a number of recommendations attached to this paper. However, they are also included on paper D. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That was, again, very in-depth. Now I'm going to open again to the floor for questions from members. The first member indicating is Councillor O'Coffey.
And thanks for the presentation. It was very clear and informative. I have two real questions I wanted to ask around this. One is on the reserves policy. I do note that the balance as at in terms of our reserves as at the end of March 2020 was 25,345,000, and that has gone up to 27,500,000 in accordance with the figures we've been presented with previously. So that would be a very positive situation, and I do believe would enable us to take forward a robust strategy when it comes to a rate freeze potentially, but also certainly no need for cutbacks, because that reserves are a powerful basis. The second thing I wanted to discuss was the issue on capital expenditure. And if you look at the graph there, the table for the next 5 years, we're planning on spending just shy of £77 million on various projects, of which more than 58 million are council funded projects. The estimates assume that we won't spend 11 million of them in time, so we'll end up with a total spend of 65 million. That's after the optimism biases remove those out. I had occasion, obviously, to look back to see what we'd done previously in terms of capital projects and our performance to date on those. For the last year, we had initially capital plans of 12.7 million, 12.75, and our total expenditure is 10.65. So that would mean a 16% shortfall, which is significant. It's £1 in every £6 that we are planning to spend on capital. We are failing to spend it in any one given year. Now, that would be fairly similar to the shortfall that's anticipated for the next 5 years. But I actually think that that is an underestimate for the following reason. The shortfall that has occurred on our expenditure and capital projects has occurred primarily and overwhelmingly in our own projects, where they're council funded. Where these projects are subject to external funding, the council has performed much better. And where it's our own internal funding projects, we have spent 4 million, just over 4 million out of just shy of 6 million. So that's roughly £1 in £3 of council funded projects have not proceeded.
Give 30 seconds, thank you.
Yes, okay. Well, my question really is, how can we be so certain that we'll be spending £58 million worth of projects in the next 5 years. If that ratio is confirmed, that would mean 20 million of an underspend simply on the council own funded projects. So I think there's a question over our capacity as a council to deliver on the aspirational and ambitious.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coffey. I'll pass you back now to Celine to answer that. Thank you. I'm just getting you some information here.
Yeah. Okay. Hello. Can
Yeah,
you hear
we can
me?
hear you now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
So in relation to, I suppose, the latter one, which is general concern about the capital expenditure, the shortfall in our own projects, and how, you know, I suppose the challenge of delivery there. It is correct that funded projects have been prioritised, and that has been a deliberate strategy of the council in order to attract as much external funding in. It is also, I suppose, the case that the new council was established in 2015. There were some projects in train at that point in time, but it has taken a bit of time to get further projects fully developed and fully through all of the appropriate planning processes, not just the statutory planning, but the different planning processes around the whole feasibility of projects. So yes, there have been delays, but it still remains my understanding that when members discuss these, that there are aspirations to significantly enhance our facilities and services. So therefore we have to be looking to plan our capital expenditure along those lines, and also take into account the service requirements and the requirements for facilities that need to be upgraded, because some of them are of an age that they need investment and they need upgraded. So it is correct, yes, to say that grant funded projects have been prioritised and we have been successful in that, and we haven't been able yet to allocate sufficiently the resources to expedite our own projects at a similar speed, but it would be our anticipation that this will come under further, well, that we will make further efforts, and this will be something that will be uppermost in members' minds as well, and that we will be able to report back on that. In terms of just, I want to touch briefly on the comments in relation to the reserve policy. Again, I have to stress that we are not yet complete this financial year. So we have not yet, we are still working in projections. We haven't fully financed finalised or financed the position at the end of this year. So that's a little bit tricky. So it is, because I'm saying I hope and expect that we will have a surplus at the end of this year, but I can't definitively say this is the reported surplus. As soon as we can in April and May, we can clarify those positions. But as it stands, you know, it's a working model and a plan that we have, and trying to really not look at things in the confines of one specific financial year, but try to look at it on more of a rolling basis, on a 2-year stroke 3-year basis, which is what we feel the recovery will be needed for COVID, and to try and manage our finances incrementally and avoid very significant uplifts or increases in the future as well. I mean, we do have a mind to that. And maybe if I finish my comments, to just come back to Councillor Deehan's remarks, and I do now have the information to hand. So a 0% business rates would require an increase of domestic rates of 2.52%. So that would mean that the domestic ratepayers would take the entire burden. A 0% domestic rate would mean that business rates would increase by 3.01%. So that would transfer the entire burden of additional cost onto business rates. So I just wanted to provide that information for completeness.
Okay.
Thank
you very much, Celine. Thank you for that. And that's in answer to Councillor Deehan's earlier query. Yep. And moving now to Councillor O'Reilly, please. Oops.
Thank you very much, Diana. First of all, thank you both to Celine and to Catherine on very detailed reports, clearly setting out our positions. Can I just ask a little bit more, following on from Donald's point about the ability to deliver our capital projects, our own council funded in particular, but generally across the piece there. Is it a case that we have not the sufficient personnel to be able to deliver and put enough human resource into both the preparation and then the, as importantly, if not more importantly, the actual delivery in the construction of these projects? Is that primarily why we're consistently throwing up this underspend here? And then my second point, Chair, on it is that we are, after all, here talking about at a 1.37% increase, somewhere at just over 1 million. So in the context of these big capital projects and the underspends, it is not out of the way to think that we couldn't see that being able to subsidize that 1 point some million in our proposed increase.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm passing you to the Chief Executive for a comment on the capital projects.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Riley.
Chair, thank you. And I suppose really just to follow on from the comments that have already been made, I think there have been a number of reasons why we have underdelivered on the capital plan to date. I think we have enough resources, but in the context of the organisational review that we've recently completed, we previously had split the commissioning and the delivery role, which I don't think helped matters, and we have now brought those together. I think the other key area that I would highlight, Chair, is the lead-in to the delivery of some of the projects. Our planning has been poor. I think we have overestimated, been maybe over-optimistic as to how long it would take feasibility and other preparations to be put in place. And in the context of, let's say, this year, we've recently approved our play strategy. That's been about 4 years in the making. And a number of the investment decisions which are included in our medium-term plan are also predicated on strategies that are now at an advanced stage or specific economic appraisals in terms of some of our sites. I would also note the scale of expenditure on a number of the council-owned facilities, particularly in our leisure and heritage, will be much greater than projects we have undertaken to date. So I think members are right to highlight their concern, and if previous performance is an indicator, then we would be again under-delivering. But I think we have put in place the appropriate arrangements now structurally to ensure the capital plan will be delivered. I think what we also need to move to from an elected member perspective is to be able to get some key decisions in front of you so that you can progress those quickly and allow the feasibility work to be formalised and projects to commence, because recognising care for any scale of a capital project, you're really looking at about a 12-month lead-in period. And just finally, if I may say about the priority that was given to funded projects, I think that was something that the council wisely chose to do, but I wouldn't underestimate the effort that's required maybe on a £50,000 project in terms of delivery is often the same at community level as a £200,000 or £300,000 project. So I think we had multiple small projects which are very demanding on time. Moving forward, we will have, I think, more strategic, large-scale projects which are linked to defined strategies.
Okay, thank you, and that clarifies. Thank you, Chief Executive. Just the next speaker is Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Alison has kind of reassured me there on the question that I was going to ask of what exactly has been put in place to mitigate against what has happened previously, or what Donald pointed out there. My question then would be, if indeed that doesn't work, that them changes, and in 5 years' time, any of us is still about, that the same thing has happened and there's an underspend of £1 in every 3. What is the consequences? Who takes the fall for that? Is it the councillors? who agree the things, but surely it's the officers in that then are deemed to action. That does there ever be any consequences if, well, say we do underperform in the next 5 years, and if so, apart from councillors losing their seats, what is the consequences?
Okay, thank you. Back to the Chief Executive. Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, I suppose the consequences, well, Councillor Green has highlighted the elected member and the front-facing dimension. From a council perspective, this is something we have put into our own improvement plans or business plans that we will be performance managing in terms of the relevant staff members. I would also say, Chair, just in the context of the 5 years that's been set out, we are looking at some very significant council facilities. So, for example, the Ardone members are aware of the work that we have to do there. In my view, it would be unthinkable that we have a situation where the Ardone is not properly completed within the designated time frame for theatre and the arts across the district, but with a particular focus on County Fermanagh. There will be similar projects that are absolutely essential for our core business, whether that's the upgrading of our recycling centres across the district, including our fleet that's been highlighted, as well as the play. So I would think, Councillor, there would be consequences because it would impact so directly on our services and on our roles. But just to reassure, it is formally going to be part of our performance appraisals. It is something from a management team perspective that we're closely monitoring, and indeed have additional layer of governance built in that we think will give that assurance and that oversight. And it's also something from my perspective that I'm sure members will be holding me to account personally.
Okay, thank you. That again sets that out. So with no further questions, now we are going to move to item 3.3 in the agenda. That's paper C, and this is the report on the robustness of the estimates and adequacy of reserves 2021 to 2022, and this is a report from our Chief Financial Officer, who's our Chief Executive, Alison. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just really to summarise for members, as you'll be aware, the Local Government Finance Act requires the Chief Financial Officer to submit to the Council a report on the robustness of the estimates and the adequacy of any financial reserves for a financial year. And appended, Chair, to paper C, so Appendix 1, sets out the detail of the report. I'm mindful that quite a number of these issues have been referenced already in the context of the presentation, but just wish to highlight some key elements for members. So specifically, Chair, the report sets out information on uncertainties and risks associated with our revenue budgets, the robustness of the estimates and the adequacy of the reserves. And then from my perspective, I'm required to acknowledge to you my responsibility. And then at the end of the report, I will form an opinion. In terms of the uncertainties and risks, Chair, as has already been detailed in the presentation, we have looked at all of the known risks and indeed potential risks. And these included the COVID-19 pandemic, the changes in the economic climate, the ability of the rates base to generate the appropriate rates income in line with the estimated level, the potential of appeals around non-domestic revaluations, something that we haven't touched on thus far, but planning is a significant risk in the context of the risk of challenge arising from planning decisions in what is a very litigious area. Treasury management has been detailed fully in Catherine's previous presentation, and the capital plan that we've just even recently discussed. I suppose just to highlight in that report, Chair, we do note that work's at an advanced stage of refining our overall approach to the delivery and governance of the capital plan. So the estimates were also prepared in the context of the National Pay Award, and we have noted that the assumptions that we have made, which were 2%, that may not be accepted ultimately from a trade union perspective, but we think it is a reasonable assumption in the work to date. We've also taken general inflationary increases in our utilities costs and fuel costs. The waste costs have been detailed in relation to the landfill tax and also the volatility of the waste disposal recycling market, which has separately been the subject of several reports to the Council. We've detailed, Chair, the central government support grants in terms of the rate support grant and also the various areas of council activities that benefit from direct government grant support. We highlight also in that section, Chair, the risk associated with the capital programme, and I think we've already addressed members' concerns, or at least recognised the concerns that are there in relation to our previous performance. In terms then, Chair, of the robustness of the estimates, as members have already been advised, the overall aim of the estimates is to meet the legislative requirements to ensure that there's adequate funding in place through an agreed budget plan to support the Council's delivery plans, whilst ensuring that an affordable district rate is charged to the ratepayer. There is a higher degree of uncertainty this year, specifically around our income, and we have, I think, made appropriate provisions and provide detailed rationale for all of the assumptions we've made, Chair. And the key financial risks have been considered during the estimates process. We have identified any cost savings and service efficiencies, and that has only been through a very thorough and detailed review, and really a line-by-line review of our various budgets. And we do recognise the specific obligations on us to ensure that any future budget is affordable to the ratepayer. We are continuing to implement our organisational review, and I would anticipate that there will be a further review and development of operational services, specifically in Environment and Place and the Community Health and Leisure Directorates, which have been referenced earlier. And we will obviously report formally to the Policy and Resources Committee in terms of our performance against budget. In terms of the environments, Chair, the Council's procedures allow for approved environments of budgets during the year, and this assists with managing situations where budgets were inaccurate or when exceptional circumstances which were unforeseen during the estimates process may arise. And as has already been summarised, the estimates have been subject to detailed scrutiny by the Estimates Working Group, and we thank members and indeed officer colleagues for their input to that. So in summary, Chair, then, in terms of my opinion, in a very challenging environment, I consider that officers have adopted an appropriate approach which is aimed at meeting the requirements of the Local Government Finance Act and securing financial stability and security for the Council. As has been indicated earlier, the estimates process cannot provide entirely robust figures. However, I think that all of the assumptions and estimates that we have put in are appropriate, and we have highlighted to you any areas that we think would clearly impact on the robustness of the estimates. Any losses that arise in the 2021-22 financial year in this respect will have to be funded from Council reserves or in-year budget restrictions. And should actual financial performance deviate from the estimates, then the Council's financial management system will identify this and appropriate controls will be applied. So, Chair, I'm satisfied that the risks and impact on the financial stability of the Council have been fully and appropriately considered, and that robust estimates have been made for the 2021-2022 year. Finally, in this report, Chair, it's regarding the adequacy of reserves, and I'm mindful that this has already had some discussion this evening, and indeed has been the focus of some of the specific debate at the estimates working groups. As Celine had indicated, the Northern Ireland Audit Office Local Government Report, most recently, 2020 report, recommends that councils should ensure that reserve balances are monitored and managed closely. And in this context, the Council established its COVID Contingency Fund, and that will assist us generally in managing our financial position. We have also established our medium-term financial plan, which sets out the medium-term, the implications for the medium term for both our capital proposals and our revenue requirements. The minimum prudent level of reserves that the Council should maintain is a matter of judgment, and there is no precise methodology for calculating the adequacy of reserves. As has been indicated in response to some of members' earlier questions, reserves are the Council's safety net for unforeseen circumstances, and they must last the lifetime of the Council unless contributions are made from the revenue budget. The minimum level cannot be merely judged against the current risks facing the Council, but must be regularly updated as these risks can and will change over time. And in my opinion, I consider 10% of the estimated total net expenditure budget to be an appropriate level for the Council's General Fund Reserve. And as members will be aware, that's based on historical Department for Communities guidance and factors an additional sum to reflect the current environment, which continues to adapt to the COVID-19 circumstances. So just set out then, Chair, that at the 31st of March 2020, the Council's General Reserve balance was just over 3.7 million, and that represents 9.9% of the 2020-21 net expenditure budget. And we do not anticipate that that level of revenue reserve will have decreased by the 31st of March 2021. In arriving at the recommendation on the minimum prudent level of reserves, all strategic, operational and financial risks have been taken into account, as has the robustness of the estimates information. The minimum general reserve will be kept under continuous review, and in the event that this reserve is or is likely to be inadequate, I will report to the Council on the reasons for that situation and the action, if any, which I consider appropriate to take to prevent such a situation arising in relation to the corresponding reserve for the next financial year. So therefore, Chair, I would recommend that the minimum general fund reserve balance should be set at £4 million. This represents an increase of almost 210,000 on the balance at the 31st of March 2020, and that maintains the district fund at a level equating to 10.5%. And the report just concludes then, Chair, with a formal opinion and recommending that the Council approves a minimum general reserve balance of £4 million.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Chief Executive. First question to be posed by Councillor Coffey, please.
Thank you, and thanks to the Chief Executive for her report. My issue is related to this, so I'm hoping to bring it in here. It's very important, obviously, that we have demonstrate to the public the robustness of our estimates and the adequacy of our reserves. So it's important that the way in which we handle that is open and transparent as we can. I note in regard to that last week, all councillors received communication from the officials that requested. I would like to ask for your support in avoiding further comment about the Council's reserve or in your surplus position. And it went on to say, in particular, any press attention at this time is likely to be very damaging. Now, I, along with every other councillor, would not like to have any damaging impact, and as such, we all obviously respected the wishes set out in that email. However, I was most surprised to find out that the very next day that the email was sent out, a press release was actually issued by the council officers, which I had no sight of until a member of the press actually made me aware of it. And the statement itself presented what I consider to be a very one-sided perspective on the estimates and the adequacy of the reserves. In particular, as recorded by the newspaper, which I'm quoting as the Fermanagh Herald, they ran with the headline, Council expects to make 2.5 million loss as a result of COVID. Now, I don't know where that figure came from, but what I do recognise is that we're actually in surplus, as has been admitted earlier on, in relation to the COVID funding. And moreover, I then looked at the statement to make sure that I was, where did that figure come from? And it was quite strange that I found there was no reference to the 2.5 million in the statement. So I'm wondering, was there an anonymous briefing to the press in relation to this? I don't believe any councillor had that statistic, so I'm wondering, I fear very aggrieved, basically, that the councillors were told on the Thursday that we should not discuss this because it might be damaging to the council's interests. And yet on the Friday, a statement was issued, and it looks to me that there was an anonymous briefing on the surplus, alleged surplus that the council, the alleged loss that the council had encountered. So I'm very concerned about what that means for democracy in this council. I'm very concerned about that. I think it's absolutely essential that we have clarity on these matters. I do know where the 2.5 million loss comes from, but it was more than offset by the transfers that this council has received from both Westminster under the furlough and from direct transfers from Stormont. So I think it was a very partial
10
press
seconds,
release
Mark.
to start off with.
Thank you.
And I'm also concerned that additional material was given to the press. So I'm just wondering for some clarity on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I'll pass you over to the Chief Executive for a response. Thank you.
Chair, certainly the only inquiry that I'm aware of from, and I believe it was a direct inquiry from the Fermanagh Herald, which we responded to. I suppose from a council perspective, Chair, all we can do is issue responses to queries as they come in, and it's obviously at the discretion of the newspapers how they choose to report. I do know that because we had some subsequent correspondence with the Fermanagh Herald, and very helpfully they clarified the matter. They were under the impression that this meeting would be held in private, and I again am grateful to them for clarifying that quickly. And I think my indications are they maybe had some erroneous information in that regard originally. So in terms of the queries specifically, Councillor Coffey, I would certainly contend the work to date in the estimates working group has by necessity been in draft, and has in necessity been a work in progress, and has been preparing for tonight. All documentation, everything that is available, has been shared in advance within the requisite times. We've actually dealt with a number of press queries since the publication of the agenda. There certainly was no briefing of the press, and indeed no request for briefings either, I hasten to add. We did receive some normal written inquiries, as we would in the course of any council week or any business, and we have responded to those to the best of our ability. But certainly it would not be my position, and I know that of colleagues, that how the press choose to interpret it is entirely a matter for themselves. We do give the information, and we did in relation to the follow-up with the Fermanagh Herald regarding the privacy or the status of this meeting. We did say if there were any other inquiries just to let us know, and to the best of my knowledge nothing further was forthcoming.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Keenan, you're next.
Thank you, Diana. Yeah, well, very worrying what Donald just said there. I think it does bring into...
This isn't relevant. The Chief Executive has answered that. So, okay, unless, Eamon, if you have something else to comment on. Okay, thanks.
On estimates and the robustness and the mitigations, etc. One thing I do note, yes, we do have to mitigate against future risk of the market and the national and international market. And this year particularly, we'll probably notice that with COVID-19. And what it has proved is that the market is volatile and in a lot of ways out of our complete control. So last week we did have a presentation on community wealth building, and the guy did state in Preston, by adopting that process, they have actually gained back some control of the money coming in, because they're investing in local businesses. Those businesses aren't likely to get up and leave if things get tough like the multinationals. So I was just thinking, if we could include possibly an investment of 10% of the budget into community wealth building, it may be the time, and it may be useful with Brexit and the outworkings of COVID coming down the line.
Okay, again, we'll pose that to the Chief Executive. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Following on from the community wealth building presentation, I know there were a number of suggestions, and what I would suggest, if Councillor Keenan was content, we would be bringing a report back on really, I suppose, the work that Preston have undertaken, some of the initiatives that may be feasible for us to take at a local level here, and some that maybe we would benefit from wider cooperation. And in the context of the investment fund that's been outlined, clearly that's not something that's been raised so far, so it wouldn't be within our consideration this evening. But in the course of forward actions, we could certainly look at that indeed as part of the wider circular economy consideration as well.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much, Alison. Next speaker is Councillor Mcclaire.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Alison, for that presentation. I think I'm a bit worried just by hearing the reference there about the possibility of in-year budgetary constraints that would be associated with a 0% raise. I suppose I'd like to know, what is the penalty, or is there a penalty for not adhering to the budget, other than us dipping into our reserves, which appear to be quite healthy as referenced in this meeting? And just subsequent to the concerns raised, I'd like to know where this figure of 2.5 million actually came from. It's been mentioned there that we have over 3.7 in reserve, and we don't see that decreasing by the 31st of March. And indeed, we have 1.5 million coming back in from another council at the end of March, and a further 4.5 million to be redeemed mid-July from a second council that we've loaned money to. So I don't think we're in financially dire straits. I think we have been prudent in previous years, and I think it's a testament to those that have been there and have done that. But I think there's, you save and you have reserves for exceptional circumstances, and I don't think there's anyone who would disagree that we aren't currently in exceptional circumstances. Obviously, we have to have money there for any unforeseen or additional expenses, and I would foresee either this year or next we will have audit expenses, I would say, in terms of employing expertise to represent this district at a potential public inquiry into the planned toxic gold mine and processing plant in Greencastle, into projects such as providing brown bins for the entire district, and as well as ongoing COVID support to our public.
Okay, you have 30 seconds, thank you.
So I think it's just worth noting that the funds are there. We do have the surplus to cover this. So I just think it's not necessary that whilst we proceed or propose a 0% raise of the rates, that this has to impact on current provision, or indeed support and payments for staff, etc. So just to make that point, Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Chief Executive, you'd like to come in again?
Okay, Chair, I suppose just maybe to clarify, in terms of the any in-year restrictions, that was in the context of the rates as presented to members this evening at 1.37. So that's in our normal budgetary management. It wasn't predicated on a 0%, as Councillor Mcclaire had indicated. In terms of any erroneous information, Councillor, that's really not something I can comment on. Everything that we have provided has been accurate, up to date, and has been shared. So I really wouldn't be in a position to speculate on figures that have been quoted or utilised, other than I'm certainly satisfied any information that we have been asked for has been provided appropriately. And in relation just to the wider reserve debate and the utilisation of those, I think we have already rehearsed that, Chair, on a number of occasions, and certainly our opinion would be the allocation that has been identified from reserves is appropriate and is in the context of a prudent financial management going forward.
And that was well explained there, the reserves. Thank you. Now, thank you, Chief Executive. Councillor, and I'll just pass you over to Celine here. Yes, thank you.
Chair, if I may possibly shed some light on the issue of concern that has been raised. Firstly, the Council, when it posts the agenda and issues the papers for this meeting, does normally issue a press release with that. It's a fairly general press release, and it just highlights some of the key information, and that the meeting will be held, and in this instance held virtually and available on live stream. Over the last week to 10 days, there have been a whole series of press inquiries, and I think the origin of the concern, the issue that has been raised, was an inquiry from a journalist about, and this is the nature of the inquiry, that there's been a warning that there could be significant rates hikes in councils across Northern Ireland brought on by loss of revenue due to COVID. Is Fermanagh and Omagh District Council area going to see a rates hike? If so, how much is it expected to increase? It's stated that one council is considering a 30% increase in rates. Can you confirm if this is or isn't FODC? At least 2 councils are facing insolvency. Can you confirm if this does or does not include FODC? How much revenue has FODC lost due to COVID-19? What form did that take? Car parking, leisure centres, art centres, etc. How much of these losses were mitigated for, and how much has the council saved by furloughing of staff? Are the council considering cutbacks to services? If so, what services will endure cuts? That's just one set of inquiries that we have responded to. The response that we've made was fairly general, but we did confirm that that we had losses. The losses that we have reported to you tonight, which are in the region of £2.7 million. Yes, we have received some exceptional funding in this year, which has helped to offset those, but we do anticipate that there will be losses in the future as well. So again, I would emphasise what Alison has said. All of the information has been provided in good faith. Our communications staff work very hard to respond to journalists as well as to provide the press releases and information. And again, it's important that we do that to preserve the reputation of the council. Ad hoc commentary around this whilst we're at this delicate position has not been helpful, and that I hope puts some context to the request for, to adhere to the process and work through it whilst we're still in the draft situation.
Thank you, Celine. And it really does undermine the work that is being done to give councillors the true picture. So thank you for that, Celine. Now moving now to Councillor Green.
Yeah, thank you. And listen, I completely accept all the figures and whatever way they've been issued are all correct. The council took in 2.5 million less due to COVID, but that was mitigated by what we got from outside sources. The fact is that we are 1.5 million in surplus for the year. I think that's a non-disputable fact. In fact, it's probably more than that. Now, let's just take it from the constituents out there, the residents of Fermanagh, and they look at the council being 1.5 million in surplus in a year where a lot of businesses been closed for most of the year. The council facilities, especially in rural areas, toilets, recycling centres, has been closed for up to half the year. The leisure facilities has been closed. The people hasn't been able to access almost anything in the council, bar the bin service, which is fair play to the council for being able to continue it, and a number of grants for food parcels. But when you look at it from a constituent or a resident's point of view, it's very hard to see how we're justifying 1.37 increase when everything was closed. They were fit to use nothing. None of us were fit to use anything. Out in the toilets in Brookborough, I think it was the end of October when they opened again. There's one toilet that's disabled, one open. I don't think even most people can use it. So, a reality check, we need to step back and just maybe not look at it from the bubble we're in, maybe take a look at it from the wider public's view. I'll leave it at that.
Your pardon. I'll just pass back over to the Chief Executive here. Thank you.
Okay, no, Chair, well, I suppose the couple of comments I would make in response, I think firstly, all of the work that we've undertaken to date, Chair, is in the context of the wider implications, and we do recognise the situation across the district. In terms specifically of Councillor Green's concerns around I suppose the service provision, yes, the council has been disrupted in terms of the COVID restrictions. What I would say is that at the first lockdown from end of March, that's when we obviously had a period of closure at the recycling centres. They opened again from, I think it was April, the end of April, the town centre sites, and gradually on a rolling programme worked out, and that took some time. We also have to now implement all of the COVID restrictions as part of our day-to-day business, and that has been one of the outworkings in terms of the operation of a number of the toilets across the district as well. We have, however, been able to maintain all of our council services largely unaffected, other than the facilities such as leisure or heritage and arts facilities that have been closed as a directive due to public health concerns, and we have had some reduced operational times because of those restrictions as well. But we have actually had significantly increased provision on our community services side. We have moved everything as far as we can on our language development, arts development and culture. We've continued with planning, building control, all of our statutory functions, including our registration services throughout. And we've contributed over £650,000 directly from council funds for COVID and business support grants. So I fully recognise accept the position that Councillor Green is articulating, Chair, but I do think we have delivered a very comprehensive service actually in extremely challenging times. And I suppose even when our facilities are closed, as has been detailed in the presentations, we do continue to incur significant costs, and we do have obligations to our staff as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Alison. At this stage, I'm not allowing you in, Councillor Coffey, because you have spoken before on this. We are on item 3.3 in the agenda. So the recommendation is that we approve the minimum general reserve balance of 4 million, and I'm asking members if we have a proposer for that recommendation. So, Councillor Swift?
Yes, propose.
Proposed, thank you. Councillor Blake?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you. So that's proposed by Councillor Swift, seconded by Councillor Blake, and all agreed? Thank you very much, members. Thank you. And at this stage...
Sorry.
I'm
we're very quick on it there before I got me button on.
Okay, Councillor Green.
Just one question before we agree to that. If we agree to that, is that then if 0% was accepted, does that mean cutbacks in services?
As I see, this is about the reserves.
Sorry, Chair, yes, this is just very specifically, it is relating to paper C only, Chair, and it's the report on the robustness of the estimates and adequacy of reserves. So it's specifically that the Council approves a minimum general reserve balance of £4 million, and that's as detailed in Appendix 1. So that is the only recommendation.
So that has no relation to the reserves that could be used to have a 0% increase. That's just the clarification one.
No, that's correct, Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Green. Now moving to item 4 on the agenda.
I'd like to indicate my dissent, please. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That's noted, Councillor Coffey. Thank you. To strike the district rate for Fermanagh District Council area, that's paper D. And I'll pass you over to Celine, our Director of Corporate Services and Governance. Thank you, Celine.
Chair, members, this is a short paper, but it really brings everything that we've talked about tonight together. And it is around the setting of the non-domestic and the domestic rate as required by the legislation. The recommendations are set out at section 7, and they are a summary of the recommendations that are in paper A and paper B. Those recommendations are that the Council approves the medium-term financial plan for 21 to 26, that it approves the minimum revenue provision policy for 21 to 22, the Treasury management policy and the Treasury management strategy for 21-22, the prudential and Treasury indicators for 21 to 26, and the capital strategy for 21-26. That it authorises an affordable borrowing limit of 5.6 million for 21-22, and all of that relates to paper B. And then that the Council adopts the estimates for 21-22 as set out in Appendix 2 of paper A and authorises the expenditure shown in the detailed schedules, authorises the expenditure and transfers to and from reserves set out in paper A, and strikes a district rate for 21-22 for Fermanagh District Council area of 22.1225 pence in the pound for a non-domestic rate and a domestic rate of 0.3718 pence in the pound.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for that, Celine. At this stage, I'll revert back to Councillor Keenan's proposal for a zero rate, and I'll pass over to the Chief Executive for a comment on that, please.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Well, maybe just to recap to make sure I have Councillor Keenan's proposal correct. So it was that we would set a 0% rate for the incoming financial year with zero cuts to services, zero cuts to projects, zero cuts to the times, hours and conditions of staff and associated staff numbers. So, Chair, we have worked through considerable detail at the various estimates workshops, and the proposal as presented by Councillor Keenan is in the technical sense of the word, it's incompetent in that it is not something that we could honestly say to you can be achieved, because 0% will have cuts. It will result definitely in impaired service provision. We would have to look at the staffing implications. It will certainly impact on capital and it will impact on projects. So there is, from my perspective, I must advise you that that as a proposal cannot stand technically.
Okay, well, that being the case, I just rule that proposal out of order, and I'm moving now to Councillor Barry McElduff.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I want to make a proposal. I want to propose that this council defers striking a district rate for the Fermanagh-Noma District Council area for the 2021-22 year until another special council meeting before the deadline for imposing the rate. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'll put that to our Chief Executive here now.
Chair, I suppose my only query around this is the papers, everything that has been presented for members is predicated on the work that we have undertaken to date. I'm unclear from Councillor McElduff's proposal if it is merely a deferral to reconsider the information in front of members, but certainly we would not be in a position to rework detail within the time frame that we now have available to us. So I'm assuming from the proposal it's a deferral to reconsider the information that is already before members.
Yes, thank you, Chief Executive, for that procedural, guidance. That's exactly it. It would be effectively that we adjourn this meeting for a kind of a reconvening, if that's in line with what you've just said. Thank you, Chair and Chief Executive.
Okay, members, we've had a considerable presentation here, and it is my hope that we can reach consensus this evening and avoid further meetings, but that's up to the members, of course. I'll bring in Councillor Mary Garrity here at this stage. Thank you, Mary.
And thank you, Chair, and then special thanks to the officers, particularly Celine and Catherine. Well, I suppose I'm a wee bit taken aback by Councillor McElduff's proposal there, but just to put everything in context, and I haven't spoken tonight, 10 to 12 hours of work and discussion has went on with councillors to get to this meeting. Many more hours and discussion and work has went on with officers. I am hearing questions tonight that were answered at those meetings. I would be reluctant to support what Councillor McElduff is suggesting. However, I do believe there's a number of councillors that would benefit from digesting the information perhaps again. I had flashbacks to, was it Wilson out of Dad's Army, permission to speak, Mr. Monaghan, and speaking at the wrong time. This is a very complex, document, and these 10 to 12 hours were hard and difficult to digest. But for those of us that did, we think we've understood where we've come to, but for the benefit of good relations and the chamber, and for those that I think would benefit maybe from this, my question would be, I would support Councillor McElduff's deferment, but I would say to the Chief Executive, we have a legislative responsibility here. Can we fit this meeting in within the time frame that we have to strike the rate? That would be my question. And if that was possible, then I would support the deferment so members could properly digest information. There has been some crazy suggestions here tonight that was clearly outlined by Celine for some suggestions, and I think it's only fair that some of the members understand decisions that are being made. I know there's 22 people listening in early tonight, and I hope some of them's the media and taking it in. I'm sorry we hadn't a bigger uptake. Maybe that council in England, maybe we should be more like them and we'd get a better look in. But if Alison could confirm that, Diane, I think that's our role as a council first. Could we squeeze in this extra meeting that Councillor McElduff's looking for?
Yeah, okay, so Chair, the legislation has changed so that we have up to the 1st of March, which would mean we would have to meet next week. But it just would need to be clear, but I think Councillor McElduff has clarified, it would be representing the information that you have this evening to you. It would not be any reworked information. So yes, Councillor Garrity, we could, I'll just look at the schedule, we could accommodate an additional special council meeting in advance of the legislative date for setting the rate.
Thank you, Alison. In that case, Diana, Chair, I would second Councillor McIndoff's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll thank you for that, Councillor Garrity. So that's another proposal. I'm going to go and take some comment from other councillors as well. The proposal is there, it's on the table. So I'm going to Councillor Deehan next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I too, Chair, am somewhat taken aback by Councillor McElduff's proposal. And my question would be, Chair, for what purpose are we seeking to adjourn this meeting and reconvene? We have had 4 working group meetings. We have had a very detailed presentation from Celine, from Catherine, and from the Chief Executive. I have stated before that in this process, we have to strike a balance between what we would wish for, what our wish list is, which clearly is a 0% increase in rates across the board. That isn't going to be possible without a substantial reduction in service. We have had a detailed discussion about looking at our reserves and how we might use them, how we might transfer them. All of those factors have been taken into consideration. I personally am content with the information that the officers have given us. I acknowledge that businesses and domestic ratepayers face huge financial pressure, but we as a council have a legislative requirement to meet. We have to plan for the future. We are quite clear that we want to progress our capital plan. We have to consider our staff and their jobs and the fact that we're a major employer in this area. So, Chair, I really am at a loss to understand why we would be deferring this meeting.
Okay.
I'm content with what has been provided to us tonight, and I would like to propose to the contrary that we approve the plans and policies presented to us, that we do adopt the estimates and authorised expenditure, and we do strike the district rate for 21-22 as indicated in the report. So I'd make that proposal, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Deehan. Councillor Keenan, you're next.
Yeah, I just take offence to the Chief Executive's comment that my proposal was incompetent. I just want to refer to the Minister of Finance, who said that they were freezing the regional rates for both household and domestic, and he would urge all councils to play their part and do the same in respect of the district rates. And we were told at the estimates group that it was going to cost 1.5 million for a rates freeze. Now, when we look at our balance that we have a lot. Yes, I know you're nodding the head there, but we have a lot more than 1.5 million. I don't think it's incompetent at all. I think it's just a will to do it. But anyway.
Okay, thank you. I'll let the Chief Executive respond to you, Councillor Keenan.
No, Chair, it's just to clarify, and I thought I did in my intro, it's a technical term, incompetent, in that it cannot be technically delivered. So the proposal as framed by Councillor Keenan in relation to the 0% rates and the zero impact on all of the other things cannot be achieved. So that meets the definition of technical incompetence. So it's a technical wording.
Can it be achieved without cuts to services?
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. And that's not a personal comment. Thank you, Councillor Keenan. I hope that clarifies that. Councillor Mcclaire.
Thank you, Chair, yeah, and thanks for the clarification there. I have to say I don't see why it can't be done when we have the reserves there, when we have the surplus there, as has been alluded to. I don't know how many times tonight and over the past number of meetings, and it's that seemingly some members of the SDLP are failing to grasp that we have a potential here to stand up for our residents and fight for a zero rate increase while still protecting the services that we provide as a council. I don't know what the leader of that particular party was getting at within
Excuse
council.
me, Chair,
here.
point of order. What are you referring to me for? And in what context? I never mentioned any member
No,
of the
I'm not sorry, councillors. No, councillors. I'm going to mute you if we can't control this. I'm keeping strictly to the business to hand here. Thank you. That's moving on to the next councillor. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair.
No, I'm not. No, you're being cut off because I'm not taking an insult.
I was shouted across by a point of order with no point of order actually referenced, which is against standing orders.
I've ruled. Thank you, Councillor Mcclaire. Moving on to Councillor Coffey. We have a number of speakers here.
This is unbelievable.
Councillor Mcclaire, we have a number of Councillor Mcclaire. I have to insist, we have a number of speakers who have not been given an opportunity to speak tonight. You have had the floor on many occasions, well rehearsed. We've listened to your points. So I'm moving on now to Councillor Coffey. I have Councillor Thompson, I have Councillor Green in again, and I have Councillor Irvine. So I have a couple of councillors who have not spoken this evening. So I'm moving now to Councillor Coffey. Thank you.
Chair, it was just very disrespectful from the previous member. So it's not the first time she's.
Thank you. I've noted your comments. We're moving on. Thank you.
Yeah, I think when we come to these rates, I think it's very important to realize what we've just all collectively endured, and that is a 1 in 100 year pandemic, which has resulted in one of the greatest economic downturns in the history of the modern economy for hundreds of years, 300 years. I think it's the greatest contraction that has been experienced by the UK economy in 300 years. And I'm sure probably there's no records for Irish economy, but it's something similar. And I think that we have very considerable reserves. 27 million. It was 25 million last year. We have 27 million this year. We're so redolent with reserves that we're able to loan £6 million to other councils. I do not see how a proposal that would just address the chronic pain that has been felt by small traders, but also by households, how that cannot be competent. We can do this. There's sufficient within the one loan. One loan would be sufficient, actually. The smaller of the two to the councils.
Councillor Coffey,
to bridge the finance. I'm going to interject, the main point I want to make. Well, you're cutting across us all. You're letting other people cut across us.
What I want to do is
there's no justice and no democracy in this place.
I'm sorry. I want to refer you to Celine, who will reiterate what was said earlier in the meeting in explanation. I think it's a point that we had heard before. I thought.
No, I haven't actually said this point at all. Okay. What I'm just after saying, I don't think I've said it before. I've seen other people say points similar to it, but I think that I'm challenging the fact that that's not a competent proposal, because I think that the reserves are there, clearly there, and everyone in this council area knows that that's a competent proposal. And in fact, as has been pointed out by our colleague there, Councillor Keenan, the finance minister himself has said that that's a competent proposal. So I don't see how we can suddenly just throw out the possibility of what's been considered here. Thank you, Chair.
I'll bring you Chief Executive.
It's just to comment
here.
specifically on that, Chair. I appreciate you've already ruled on the proposal. Councillor, I think we are conflating two matters. The Finance Minister made a statement. He also, I know he made a supplementary statement and indeed made comment at the partnership panel and encouraged councils to be prudent and to do what they could in relation to the extreme circumstances. At no point have I seen the Finance Minister make a statement which indicates 0% rates, 0% cut on budget, sorry, 0 impact on staff, services, projects, budgets, and keep doing everything as normal. My commentary in relation to Councillor Keenan's proposal simply related to the fact that how the proposal was framed meant it technically unable to be delivered. You cannot set a 0% rate and have no impact. Therefore, certainly in my opinion, Chair, and in the definition of competent proposals, that fails and it's therefore incompetent.
Thank you, Chair. Now moving to Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Chair. A very long debate as usual, and can I thank Celine, Catherine, and the team for just not for the last 4 meetings and this evening, but all their work all year round. And I want to thank them on behalf of our DUP grouping for all of their work. They have put it all that information to us all over the last 4 meetings and this evening. A very comprehensive report indeed. And I want to, we're a party of high quality services at the lowest possible rates. However, we know what's happened in the last year. Everyone has had a difficult year. However, we do have to look forward, and we look forward to the end of this term and whoever's here in the next term. So I'm prepared to second Councillor Dehan's proposal on behalf of the DUP group.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Now, the other proposal on the table that's been proposed has been a deferment. Okay, just to recap that, and there are 2 proposals, and the proposal then for the rate of 1.37 by Councillor Dehan and seconded by Councillor Thompson. Moving now to Councillor Green. And the final speaker will be Councillor Irvine at this stage. Thank you, Councillor Green.
Yeah, just a couple of the comments about 4 previous meetings. Was the workshops around this. As I have continually said, them are set at the time of the day. Hear me? Can anyone hear me? Or
yeah, I'm going to support it.
Am I back on yet, or I don't know what happened there? Was it cut off or muted?
I think we're slowly coming. If you, Councillor Green, can maybe restart when we from the start, if you know what I mean, Chair.
Oh, can you hear me yet? No.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Just Councillor Green, we could just hear you now. I think the connection is re-establishing, Councillor. So just maybe hold on just for a moment, please. I think everyone's just coming back on.
Yeah, back in. Councillors, I'm sorry, we have had an issue there. You may need to again click on your audio.
I think, Chair, there's still a problem.
No, still a problem here. Audio has been disconnected.
I can hear you, Chair.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Thank you.
back
So
on
back
now.
on, everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
People might have to just click the connect to audio again, that's all.
I think if you can all reset your audio, and we'll wait till we have it's just connecting, yeah.
Just might take a couple of minutes, Chair.
Just take a couple of minutes, members, and hopefully we'll have you all back on here.
Chair.
Sorry, who's that, please?
On here, Chair. Can you hear me? Just because I'm getting a connecting to audio message, but I just wanted to check it was working.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Chair, can you hear me? It's Councillor Thornton here.
I can hear you, Councillor Thornton.
For some reason, I can't mute here.
Yeah, it's the problem for everybody. It must be the server that's connecting for everybody.
Right.
So maybe if people stay quiet unless you invite them to speak, I suppose.
Okay, so I think if everybody stays on mute, I have some hands up. I just need to check that everybody can actually.
I think people can mute. I think that.
Oh no, we can't.
Oh, I
mute.
see. I don't think you can mute, so I just ask everybody please not to speak
till you signify.
until I signal. I mean, I think it was
Councillor Green.
Councillor Green has literally thrown us all. I think it must be Brookborough.
I can hear you clearly. I don't know what's wrong with the rest of you.
Now, I just looked in the chat room to see, Councillor Bird, can you hear us? I think we've got. We take a recess for a few minutes.
Just what we'll ask everyone, I think, is to log back out and log back in again, and we'll just take 5 minutes recess to allow that, Chair.
Okay, members. Members, to get over this glitch, I'm going to ask you if you're agreeable to take a 5-minute recess to allow you to log out and log back in to the meeting.
I'll propose, Chair.
Thank you. It's Councillor proposing. Have I a seconder, please?
I'll second, Chair. Howard Thornton.
Thanks, Councillor Horton. So we'll all disconnect. We'll leave the meeting and we'll come back in if you take 5 minutes. Thank you, members. Okay, councillors. Thank you, councillors. We have now reconnected the meeting. We had a connection loss there, which happened some time ago, I think about 25 minutes ago. So we're going to resume from this point. And just recapping from where we left off, we have 2 proposals in front of us. One from Councillor Mcclaire to defer, seconded by Councillor Garrity. One from Councillor Deehan to accept the rate at 1.37, seconded by Councillor Era Thompson. And the next person to speak when the meeting was interrupted was Councillor Green. Do you still want to come in, Councillor Green?
Yeah, well, it was just to make the point that a few councillors had mentioned about the 4 working group meetings that there had been, and I actually only got to the last one because of work commitments. And this thing of councillor saying about the way we all had this information right to the end. It was a very brief meeting the last time where a lot of this seemed to be decided. I suggest going forward that these meetings aren't put times that rules out councillors from attending them. And, you know, it's all right for councillors that can attend them, but, you know, a lot of us can't. And we would have had a lot of contribution to make.
Okay, thank you for that. Now moving to Councillor Irvine, please. Sorry, Councillor Wilson.
Yes, Chair. Well, 7 o'clock.
Councillor Wilson, actually it's Councillor Irvine is next to speak.
Yes,
followed by Councillor Deehan. I'll let you in after Councillor Deehan.
Right.
If you could wait. Thank you. If you keep your hand up, you'll be after Councillor Deehan. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. So Councillor Irvine.
Thank you very much, Chair. Diana. Look, I've attended most of the meetings as well. One I didn't make due to work commitments as well, as Councillor Green has alluded to, but I was happy enough with the information provided and was able to get up to speed. I think this year, everybody has referred to it. It is a completely exceptional year, unfortunately, with everything, and everybody is in dire straits, no more so than the council ourselves, because we are an employer, a large employer within the county, and we've got to actually protect our employees as well. The information provided by the officers actually shows what our revenue position going the next year is, and what we hope to achieve with regard to our capital programme, both in next year and in the next 5-year period. And the thing with capital is a lot of our reserves are earmarked for forward capital. If we start thinking about using reserves to bolster up an in-year revenue position, we will eventually dwindle and waste our reserves, and we'll have nothing left for capital, and we will be forced into the situation, like some other councils are, of having to demand huge rates increases from our domestic and non-domestic ratepayers to actually pay for both our revenue and our capital position. I think the officers have done an extremely good job. They've been very diligent in providing us with the information, and they have actually come down from a position at the start of somewhere like an 8% increase now to a 1.37. What we should also bear in mind is that because the regional rate now is struck at 0, there will be no rate increase on the regional side. And because the rates bill is made up of our own local domestic take and the regional take, the actual net effect for ratepayers on both sides, domestic and non-domestic, will actually only be a 0.61% increase. So I think with everything that is going forward and with the proposals that we have in regard to capital moving forward, I think our party, though looking to try and minimise the effect and going towards 0 if we could, we realise that we have to actually take this minimal increase to actually protect our jobs, protect services, and to fund in the future our capital programme, which is to the benefit of our ratepayers. So our party group will be in favour of the proposal proposed by Councillor Deehan and seconded by Councillor Thompson. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Irvine. Councillor Deehan, do you want back in here?
Well, yes, Chair. Thank you. And prior to losing connectivity, I wasn't sure how much of the debate I had missed. But I did ask a question before I made my proposal in relation to Councillor McElduff's proposal to defer, and I did ask for what purpose. And actually, I think Councillor Irvine has summed it up extremely well. And the Chief Executive has stated that the figures cannot be reworked. You know, the rate that we're proposing to strike has come down very, very significantly from what was originally proposed. And I think that the officers have pulled out all the stops here, because we as councillors in the various workshops made it clear that it would be totally unacceptable to us to accept any diminution of services, any loss of jobs, and any deferment of our capital projects. So, you know, we cannot have our cake and eat it. The Chief Executive has been unequivocal. She has said we cannot have a 0% rates no rates increase if we want to maintain services. It just isn't possible to do that, and I accept it fully. And we have to be cognizant of our financial security going forward as well. Celine has highlighted the uncertainty and the fact that we haven't yet reached the end of the financial year. So I just wanted clarity. I don't want to be a source of division within the chamber, Chair, but I just wanted clarity on Councillor McElduff's reason for deferring this decision. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, I'll go directly. I'll go directly to Councillor McElduff just to answer that question, and once he's done that, then I'll go to Councillor Bert Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you,
Councillor McElduff. Yeah, thank you.
Chair, I 100% accept that we have all the documentation, all the papers. That's why I was guided by the Chief Executive on a reconvened meeting, you know, as distinct from a special council meeting, distinct from this one. I'm confident that we as a council will meet our legislative responsibilities, you know, to strike a rate before the 1st of March. My request on behalf of our group is for further reflection. That's all it is. You know, it's almost in the spirit of an adjournment. Now, during these online meetings, an adjournment is a very hard thing to achieve. If we were meeting in person, we could take the training room or the committee room, and we could adjourn to a side room for further reflection on some of the key issues that have been raised in the course of tonight's debate. So because that facility isn't really open to me and to my group, I simply wanted to ask.
Okay. So the proposal is there on the table, and we'll go to that. We're going to speak to Councillor Wilson next, and then we'll go to the proposals. Thank you, Councillor Green. I'm not going to let you in because I'm allowing one comment, and that's it. And you've been in before, so I'm going to Councillor Wilson, and then we're going to go to the voting process. Thank you.
Yes, Chair. I do not want to take up your time, but 7 o'clock doesn't suit me. If you can't make the meeting suit you, it'll be 8:30 at least before I see my grandson doing the work out in the yard that I should be doing, where I couldn't get into 8:30 or 9 o'clock. So that's only an excuse. If you want to be there, you'll be there, and if you don't, you'll not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, I'll bring you back to the proposal, first of all, from Councillor Mcclaire, that we defer the meeting and we will seek a date. If that is proposed, it has been seconded by Councillor Garrity. If it is passed, we will look for a meeting date. So if I could ask if everyone takes down their hands, please.
Chair, sorry for interrupting, Chair, but John Coyle has just lost connection there at the second. He just messaged me. If I can get some help, tell him. Thank you.
Okay, we'll get IT back over to that. So I'll just pause for a moment here. So I'll just take a show of, if you could take the hands down, Councillor Dehill and Councillor Green. If you could remove the hands at this point, thank you. And Councillor Green. I don't think Councillor Green's hearing me.
Sorry, Chair. Seamus has just said that he's having internet troubles, so just to communicate that.
Okay. What we'll do is we'll do a roll call on this vote, because I think it's the best way for everyone to have a representation, just to ensure, and whoever we can't get, we will go back to them if they're not here at this process. So this is the proposal. I'm still waiting for Councillor Coyle to join us here, to get him back on, and Councillor Green. Councillor Green. What I'll do is I'll go through alphabetically and then whoever hasn't responded, we'll go back to them, and that'll give time for connection to be re-established. So you can be
Feely off too, Diana. Sorry to do this on you.
Councillor Feely.
Yeah,
we're having problems here. Okay.
Chair, apologies. Would it be sensible to take a brief minute or two to try and get everyone sorted with phone, with dialing in and stuff like that, Chair?
Okay, we'll take 5 minutes. We have Councillor Coyle back in, so we'll take 5 minutes. We'll come back to you. Don't leave the meeting, members. Please stay on the meeting. And we are live, so it will be just on mute. Thank you. Okay, members, we're just waiting for Councillor Feely, so 1 minute more, or we could examine if he can dial in as well. Maybe one of his colleagues could contact him. He could dial in then. Thank you. Okay, members, we're back up to 49. We're back up to 49 participants, and that's our full complement this evening. I'm just going to connect. And we're live, we're back, thank you. So we're going to the proposal by Councillor McElduff to defer for another meeting, seconded by Councillor Garrity. I'll go through the roll call to ensure that everybody has a chance to respond, that we're not missing anybody. So starting with myself, Diana Armstrong against, Councillor Baird.
Against.
Councillor Blake.
For.
Councillor Buchanan.
Against.
Councillor Campbell.
Ivavor for.
Councillor Sean Clark.
For.
Councillor Coyle. For. Councillor Curry.
Ivavor for.
Councillor Deehan.
Against.
Councillor Anne-Marie Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Sean Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Stephen Donnelly.
Against.
Councillor Keith Elliott.
Against.
Councillor Erskine.
Against.
Councillor Feely.
For.
Councillor Anne-Marie Fitzgerald.
Ivavor for.
Councillor Gannon.
For.
Councillor Garrity.
For.
Councillor Green. Councillor Green. I'll come back to you. Councillor Irvine.
Against.
Councillor Keenan.
Against.
Councillor Catherine Kelly.
For.
Councillor Podrigan Kelly.
For.
Councillor Maguire.
Ivavor for.
Councillor Mcclaire.
Against.
Councillor McCaffrey.
Lahai for.
Councillor McCann.
For.
Councillor McCloughery. Councillor McCloughery. I'll come back to him. Councillor McElduff.
For.
Councillor McPhillips.
For.
Councillor O'Coffey.
Against.
Councillor O'Reilly.
For.
Councillor Rainey.
Against.
Councillor Robinson.
Against.
Councillor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Swift.
Against.
Councillor Thompson.
Against.
Councillor Thornton.
Against.
Councillor Warrington.
Against.
Councillor Wilson.
Against.
And going back to Councillor Green. Councillor Green. Is he mute? Councillor Green, can you unmute?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
For or against, please?
I'm only after coming in again. I don't know what.
This is Councillor McElduff's proposal to reconvene. Are you for or against, please?
So you just went on ahead without councillors being back. For.
Well, we thought you were there. So Councillor McCloughery?
Against.
Thank you. That's all councillors accounted for, and we're just going to tally this now. Thank you. Now, members, we have 24 and 20 against. And this invokes the casting vote by the chair. And members, I'm voting against. So the proposal falls. And we now go to Councillor Deehan's proposal.
Chair, can I come in? Just on a point of the system isn't working properly. The mute button won't work. I don't know whether it's only on my side, but if it's on every side, I am.
Well, I can assure you, Councillor Green, I can assure you we've collected every single councillor there in a democratic fashion. We've got every single council has voted.
But I'm saying for going forward, the tactical, the technology isn't working.
We will have a think. We will have a look at this. What has happened in terms of technology? It's not completely foolproof. Now,
no, but at the minute it's not working, Chair. I can't.
It's working. I will do a roll call again in similar fashion for the next proposal. Every single councillor's name has been recorded and their vote has been taken, so that I'm assured of that there. So we're moving.
That wasn't the point I was making, but anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Green.
Ignore me if you want.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Moving to Councillor Deehan's proposal that we accept the rate at 1.37.
Can I get a recorded vote on this one, please?
We can have a recorded vote. Yes, have you a seconder for that, please? Thank you. One member.
I second it. Yeah,
Okay.
I second that.
So the proposal from Councillor Deehan. So that is the proposals for all recommendations as in paper D, proposed by Councillor Deehan and seconded by Councillor Thompson. Thank you. So Councillor Armstrong 4, Councillor Baird
4,
Councillor Blake
4,
Councillor Buchanan
4,
Councillor Campbell
Ivaver 4,
Councillor Clark
4,
Councillor Coyle 4, Councillor Siobhan Curry
Ivaver 4,
Councillor Deehan
4, Chair.
Councillor Anne-Marie Donnelly
4, Chair.
Councillor Sean Donnelly
4,
Councillor Stephen Donnelly
4,
Councillor Keith Elliott
4,
Councillor Erskine
4,
Councillor Feely Councillor Feely, you're on mute. I'll come back to Councillor Feely. Councillor Amory Fitzgerald.
Ivaver 4.
Councillor Gannon.
4.
Councillor Garrity.
4, Chair.
Councillor Green.
Against.
Councillor Irvine.
4, Chair.
Councillor Keenan.
Against.
Councillor Catherine Kelly.
4.
Councillor Padraig Kelly.
4.
Councillor Maguire.
Ivaver 4.
Councillor Mcclaire.
Against taking rates.
Councillor McCaffrey.
In Aden, against.
Councillor McCann.
4.
Councillor McClaughley.
4.
Councillor McElduff.
4. Ivaver.
Councillor McPhillips.
4.
Councillor O'Coffey.
Against.
Councillor O'Reilly.
4.
Councillor Rainey.
4.
Councillor Robinson.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Swift.
4.
Councillor Thompson.
4.
Councillor Thornton.
4.
Councillor Warrington.
4.
Councillor Wilson.
4.
We'll return to Councillor Anthony Feely.
Sorry, Chair, I'm not hearing.
Councillor Feely, the recommendation. This is for the recommendations in paper D, proposed by Councillor Deehan, seconded by Councillor Thompson.
Against.
Against. Thank you, members, for that. Do you make it that? Okay, members, so that there are 34 votes for and 6 votes against, so that motion is carried. And that is the recommendations in paper D. Thank you. Just turning to the agenda again. Correspondence, we have no correspondence. Actually, I've lost my agenda here. Oh. Thank you. So any urgent and relevant business, none has been passed my way, members. So really that concludes the meeting. I'd like to thank everybody for attending this evening. I'd like to express thanks to Celine and her finance team for the work they have done over not just this evening in preparation of this, but for the estimates meetings as well, the 4 meetings that we attended. And I'd like to thank our Chief Executive as Chief Financial Officer, and you members for attending this evening. So just at that, thank you all for attending and wish you all good night.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well done.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Dan.
Good night, Mary Ellen. Good night, Jim.